I want to start this in a bit of a weird direction. I want to ask you what drove you to want to be a professional football player. That's an interesting. I know you had such an interesting drive as a young man. You're like, I just want to do this. Where'd that come from?
Just like a passion born really, really early. It's funny, I've said before, football wasn't just the first sport that I fell in love with. It was the only one. And I think we've talked about this, but I identify a lot probably as an athlete now, but I did not for my formative years. I was a late bloomer in the sense that I really became focused on athletics around 12. So around age 10 is when I kind of got into fitness. I walked by my brother's bedroom one night. He's 5 years older than me, and I saw him doing push-ups and sit-ups before bed. And I was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "Push-up and sit-up." I said, "Can I join?" And I did, and that just created that obsession. And then it was literally at recess in grade 6. I didn't know what a running back was. And they said, "You go be the running back." I was just fast. I had just literally hit puberty. It was perfect timing of doing like 250 to 500 push-ups and sit-ups every single night for like a year or two. I suddenly was like big, fast, and strong. But prior to that, I was like the most unathletic kid in the universe. And so it was just this concept of like, get this ball, and it was a giant game of tag. I had no idea what a running back was. Within a year of that, I'd obviously signed up for a league. I had bought every single football magazine I could find in any single store in Scarborough and started writing my own book of what does it take to be a great running back. So everything I read, I would just start to write and record in terms of what are the things I need to work on: balance, shiftiness, strong legs, et cetera. And so it was just, I probably was just primed for a passion towards something, and that was the thing that came into my life. That's my best hypothesis.
Tell me about the book.
Oh, it was just as a kid, I just took like a moleskin, and I still do that with all my thoughts and ideas.
Right.
And I literally just started like mapping.
You created a playbook on who you're becoming.
Yeah, I think without even really necessarily calling it that, it was just like an obsession that was born at a young age of like, okay, this is the thing that I'm doing. How do you become phenomenal at this? How do you focus on this? And that just, looking back, I have nothing but positive memories. It just really drove me.
Was that something that you feel was innate to your biology, or is it something that you witnessed in the people around you, or was it coming from some version of inadequacy?
I don't think I had any concept of inadequacy at the time, only because I don't think that was even on my radar. At the time, I certainly was insecure with respect to sports, but I felt very confident as a thinker. And we've talked about that a little bit, this idea that even now, I've worked through it a lot as an adult, but if you told me to walk into a room where I knew nobody and you said you had to solve a really complex problem and deal with some really, really tough people, I'd have like zero anxiety. Be like, okay, I'm focused, I'm ready. If you said, okay, we have an athletic competition tomorrow, I'd be like, oh shit, I need time to prepare.
And you knew that when you were 10?
Yeah, I think that's where it was kind of like forming. So I think this idea was, I think what drove me when I was young in terms of like asking what led me to that, I've reflected upon that since. I think at the time it just seemed innate. It just seemed like the very natural thing. In fact, I would even go so far as to say, nothing I did during those years, this is probably the best way to say it, nothing I did during those years seemed abnormal to me.
And shouldn't.
None of it was abnormal.
Right.
So I wouldn't go to a high school dance because I would go run hills with a tire tied to my back. And the idea was, if an NFL scout comes through this town on this night and he can only recruit one kid out of this town, he's probably going to pick the kid who skipped the high school dance to run hills with a tire tied to his back. Right? But that did not seem, I recognize people look at that now and they're like, that's not normal. But it just seemed like the most natural thing to do. And to work out, 3 times a day.
Well, it's not common,
natural.
But I think it could be normal. I think it could be, it's just been so far removed from, like, the concept of pursuing your passion with reckless abandon is so far removed from what society tells you. It's like you got to, be all things to all people and appease other people's expectations of you. And I think that's what's wrong with society, in my opinion, is we're conforming to make sure that everyone likes us and we fit in, rather than do what drives you, do what lights you up.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. I think you're right. And my wife and I have talked about this lots, and we now think about it with our kids. I have zero desire whatsoever to teach my kids how to contort themselves to fit in order to appease other people. Now, I teach my kids how to get along with other people, but I think it's really important to know how to get along without having to go along. And so I think you're right. There was nothing in me as a kid at that young age that thought, I have to go be A, B, and C to make these people happy. And I would say I would give credit to that. And I'm saying credit because I view that as a positive thing. That can be a negative thing if you're doing it. If you're rebelling for the sake of rebelling, that's different. If you're a contrarian just for the sake of that's your identity and you want to fight against whatever system is there. And of course I have that chip in me, so I can probably recognize it pretty quickly. But for me, it was more like, this is the path that I'm on. And the fact that many people are saying this isn't the path you should be on, or why are you so intense, or why are you so focused on this? That just didn't faze me. And I would say I give credit to that to my parents. Obviously because of their unconditional love, but they were just very, very big on character. And I saw them live a very different life. Like, I never got the sense my parents were ever trying to be something they weren't to make someone else happy. Like, never once. And I'm really, really thankful for that.
I think that's why you and I are friends. It feels like probably around the same age, I sort of went on that same path, and it didn't matter. Like, I resonate completely with what you're saying. I don't know that mine came from watching my parents live that life, but I have no idea where it came from. I'm like, I just knew that that's where I'm going and nothing was going to get in my way.
Yeah.
Sounds like a similar path. So tell me about how your parents...
By the way, do you think that you were running to something or running from something, or a hybrid?
Neither. I think it was just who I am. I think it was just like, I just know that I'm going there. I don't think I was moving away from something. I think it just became part of my identity really early. Like, this is all I want to do. This is all. And I tended to do that with the things I picked as a young person. I just want to do this. And, you know, some parents would be like, hey, no, don't just do that. You have to do all these things.
Right.
Whereas, you know, as a parent now, I reflect, I'm like, because like my natural inclinations, and I want my kids to be exposed to a lot of things. But if my parents had pulled me out of what I love as a kid, I would have probably been resentful. I probably wouldn't have pursued the other things they wanted me to do. I don't know. But my parents, I had no rules as a kid. You do what you want. You know, like, that's not safe for most people, you know. But yeah, it was very much you want to do that? Go for it. Like, you're doing well in school.
So do you have to fight that instinct in yourself now with your kids? Like, if your kid became hyper obsessed with something at, I think your son's, you know, call it 13-ish.
Yep.
If he became hyper obsessed with something, all of a sudden and dropped 15 other things that you thought would be good for him to have exposure to, do you think you'd have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to let him run with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I would do it from a place of support and curiosity, rather than like, well, he's going over there, you go over there. I'm like, no, you're going over there. I'm right there beside you. Like, whatever you need, you look over your shoulder. Like, I'm not going to be in front of you. I'm not going to be solving things for you.
Yeah.
But if you'll always know you're not alone. So, whereas I didn't have that, and I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but I know that that's how I would have liked to be supported.
Yeah.
Like, don't get in my way. But if I have a question, like, hey, how should I navigate this? I could have probably prevented a lot of roadblocks along the way.
Yeah.
Tell me about how your interaction with your parents shaped that for you.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Both my parents were immigrants to Canada. They knew nothing about athletics, knew nothing about, you know, the things that I was pursuing. My brother was obsessed with sports and training at a young age too. But I still think they were this hugely positive influence because they gave me the confidence to pursue things. I mean, my dad, I don't think ever really, I did not have a traditional relationship in the sense that I would never play catch with my dad. He was running businesses and working. And yet I can and he just, as you know, he just passed away. So I've reflected a lot on his life and how thankful I am for him. He and I are so blessed as well, by the way, because of this great relationship while I was growing up. And then I moved away and started my career. And then I actually came back home, as you know, to run his business. And so I say all that to say I'm really fortunate because my reflections of my dad are based upon our relationship up until the age of like 20. But then I got to form chapter 2 after the age of 35. And I've said this to lots of different people. If you have an opportunity to form an adult relationship with your parents, it's phenomenal because it's wildly different. You've updated your code and you can now see them so much differently. So anyway, I just put that in there because it forms how I kind of reflect upon my relationship with my dad. And so what they gave me in spades was a belief in that if I did the work, I was capable of achieving the thing. Hands down.
How did they convey that to you?
I think through verbal support, and, you know, verbal affirmation is for sure one of my, you know, love languages.
What stands out to you in your mind as this something they would have said? Like your earliest memory of them encouraging you?
Yeah, 100% it was, you can do this. Like I just heard that so often. And in fact, I will say they were psychological geniuses because they found a way to tell me that I was smart while also telling me I had to do better. The classic example, and this is, you know, people have made memes out of this with immigrant parents, but it's the idea if I came home with an 85 in school, And I'd kind of say, that's good enough. They'd say, oh no, if you weren't intelligent, we'd be happy with this. But you're the smartest kid in the class, Paul, so you should be getting 100s. You are capable of 100, so you can do that. And I've made this joke, and I said it in my father's eulogy. My parents always told me that I was smart and I was dumb enough to believe it. And so I heard that enough. So I think that was a big thing. But the other thing was they gave me opportunities to test that out. So I think about this a lot with modern day parenting. I think we're over encouraging our kids in some ways. Obviously, it's a broad theme that many people are talking about. And then we're underexposing them to opportunities to go test out their competence and their capability and thus develop it. So we shield them with our kind of natural modern day approach to helicopter parenting. We're cheering on Johnny all the time, right? The classic example of we're giving out participation trophies left, right, and center. In hockey games now, there's no more blowouts, right? They don't want them to feel shitty after a game. Even though the kids, by the way, I'm sure you've noticed this, the kids are keeping score, right? So the scoreboard says 5-0, and you ask the kids, like, no, we lost 12-0. Right. We were tracking. Kids care about hierarchy, right? So I think we've got it reversed today, where we're giving them verbal encouragement where it's not merited, and then we're not giving them the chance. I look at what my parents did, and I feel like they gave me this very good level of moral and, spiritual and emotional support and verbal support, but then gave me a ton of opportunities to go and test myself. And I think it's through that testing of yourself that obviously you develop that competence.
You nailed it. It's like proof. Like, let me go out and prove myself, and you're going to fall short, and that's okay. I literally wrote about that this morning. Is what is your relationship with hard? Right. When things start to get hard, are you avoiding it? And it's like, I always think about the literal example of I run up against a brick wall and I can move laterally. So that's my avoidance of progress. Or I can, run through the wall, run over the wall, run around the wall, but I'm going to get around that wall. Whereas a lot of people kind of stop, start looking around, look for something to do over here, but they're not thinking about what's on the other side of that wall anymore.
Completely. And the other thing my parents did in spades, which is probably the most important thing, was they exemplified it.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I have endless stories of just watching my parents face some kind of difficult situation and somehow navigate their way through it successfully. So with my father, and again, I spoke about this a lot during his eulogy because I think it's a big part of who he is, but there's just not a greater optimist in the world. And when I say optimist, I think it's important to explain it. I think a lot of people hear the term optimism and the glass is half full. People who just look around and it's rainbows and unicorns everywhere. And that's not my dad. I look at optimist as someone who's actually realistic, but has a positive mindset that says, no matter what walks in the front door, I'm going to win. So it's not somebody who says nothing bad will happen to me. It's somebody who says when bad things happen, when people say no to me, when I have a failing, when I get sick, when this, when that, I'm just going to find a way to win. And I saw that in my dad. I mean, the classic example that I gave, almost these bookends to part of his life. When he arrived in Canada, it's 1964. He's from Egypt. He's 26. He has $300 to his name, literally takes a boat across the Atlantic to the shores of Canada. It's December, and he's approaching the Canadian shores, and obviously he sees nothing but mounds and mounds of snow. And the guy had never been more than a couple hours away from, Alexandria, Egypt, where he was from. So as I said, this Mediterranean man is approaching these Canadian shores, and you'd think the first thought an immigrant from a warm country would say when they see all the snow would be, oh shit, what have I done? And you know what he said? Wow, look at all that snow and ice. I wonder if I can get it on a boat, ship it back to Egypt and sell it. Because when we were kids selling our Coca-Colas and Fantas on the beach, we could never keep the drinks cold. So just his mindset was, this is an opportunity.
Right.
And it wasn't fake for him. That wasn't something he got out of a book. That's just his DNA. And so I just saw that in my dad every single day of my life. And if you're around that enough and it's so genuine in that person, it's highly infectious.
It's funny, you use the term optimist. And so within my team watches these podcasts, and they'll know one of the most common things I say in every one of our meetings is winners find a way to win.
Right.
So I say we only hire winners. And winners, when they're faced with adversity, when they're faced with challenging situations, they're like, okay, I don't know the answer. I don't know how I'm going to win, but I'll never stop until I do. So we're sort of landing on the same thing. You call it an optimist, which is correct.
Yeah.
And I just winners win. Like, I always, tell some of my friends, I'm like, if it's the fourth quarter and the game's on the line, I'm the guy you want on the field.
Yep.
And I'm sure you feel the exact same way.
Yes. And you have this mindset, which is just like, And it doesn't matter what situation you're in. I mean, literally whatever is coming in that front door, I'm just going to have to find a way. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had in my life, and I don't mean any of this immodestly, because again, there's no bravado to it. It's literally just an inner belief of I'm going to figure this out. But how many conversations I've had throughout the course of my life where I've said, oh, I'm going to go do this. And someone says, well, you can't. Or I call someone and I say, hey, how do I go do this? And say, oh, that? You can't do that. I say, great. So how do I go ahead and do it? And they're like, no, you didn't hear me. And I'm like, no. Sorry.
I did hear you.
You didn't hear me. I'm trying to be a jerk here. You just didn't hear me. Like, whatever. It's just like you didn't hear me. I remember when I went to law school, I found a way to get football eligibility. So I had my undergrad, experience in the US, and then I came back to Canada to go to law school. I did a bunch of research and found out that there was like this kind of loophole in the thing where I could actually play football in Canada while in law school. And so I wrote a letter to the CIS and they said, yes, you have eligibility. And I went to the dean of the law school and I said, great, I want to play football in law school. I want to make sure that's okay. And he said, oh no, you can't do that. And I said, oh, why? Like, is there a rule? And he said, no. It's just like, it's going to be too much work. And I said, oh, cool. Like, I'm not worried about that. Not that I thought law school is not going to be hard or I'm just like, none of that. It was just like, I just told him, I said, there's no way in hell I'm going to wake up on a Saturday morning in an Ontario fall to the smell of cut grass. And as if I'm going to walk down to the stadium like some lunchbox Larry watching other people play a sport that I'm passionate about. So how do I do it? Right? And I've had just a million situations like that where it's like, yeah, right, how do we do it? Well, you can't. Okay. Hypothetically, if I was going to do it, right? So, and I very much got that from my father. And I felt that way, because we're going to talk about this at some point too, but when really negative things have happened, when I had, wicked concussion and my mind changed in, the blink of an eye, and I hit my absolute, rock bottom and lost my capacity to think, it was that same mindset that was like, okay, there's a version of me here that sees ending my life as the potential outcome for this if I can't recover. I had that moment. And then the next thought was like, what are you talking about? Really? No. You've got to go and lift every single stone. You have to find, like, to your point, you have to find a way to win. Because if you're willing to look everywhere for a way to win, you will win. And even if you don't win vis-a-vis your original definition of win, you will get further ahead than you otherwise would have had you not tried it.
Absolutely.
That's what you have to understand. That's what I think people don't get it. Is like, you have to actually make this decision to say, I'm going in this direction. No matter what, it will get me further than I otherwise would get.
So I'm hearing you say this. Things are going to be hard. Maybe nobody's gone past this point before. So it's not common. It's not normal. I'm going to give my all no matter what it takes. And that attitude, for sure, is not common, because most people, they come up to the closed door and they walk away and try another door. And I think what you've embodied in your life is, how do I move through this? And I know I can. And that, I can see how that would come from the immigrant mindset of like, yeah, I'm not sure how I'll figure it out, but I have to. It's almost necessity for them, isn't it? When you guys come with $300 from Egypt, there's no other option, man. It's either I die and I perish, or I figure it out. And so that, I can see how that sort of reconciles now.
Yeah.
How that's something you embody. It could just be something that it's in your DNA. It could be something you watched.
I do think, I don't know, and I'm very grateful for it. I have a high level of gratitude for my parents for instilling that and modeling it. And I think, I look back upon my father's life and I look at a lot of the decisions that he made along the way. There was an ounce of victimhood in him. And I think that's another key trait in him that I saw. And so one of the things I asked him as well is, I said, when you got to Egypt, you must have hung out with a lot of other Egyptians.
When you got to Canada.
When he got to Canada, rather. And he said, no, I didn't. And I was surprised to hear that. And I said, why not? He said, because many of them sat around and complained about Egypt. And they looked at me with his Egyptian accent. He said, Paulie, I didn't leave Egypt for more Egypt. I left Egypt for Canada. And that really impacted me, because I remember hearing that story when I was pretty young, like in late high school, early college. And I remember thinking, you have to be really careful who you're spending your time with. Because if you're spending your time around people who are just complaining all the time, it's going to pull you down. So just don't. There's all these different little choices he made along the way. And I saw the same thing in my mom. And with her, I think it's so funny because my dad looks and acted and all that kind of stuff like the highly driven person, which he is. And it manifested in a very typical male way, right? Was always on the move, always, was an entrepreneur, like the ultimate entrepreneur, always building businesses, always moving, typical sort of like dominant male in that regard. My mom doesn't present that way, but she has that same dogmatism and optimism and drive towards character development. And so that was absolutely fascinating to reflect upon as I got older. So my mom was just so keen on me and my brother and my sister just having the highest caliber character that we could. Like, she was not going to rest with us ever mailing it in when it came to character.
What does that mean?
There was
How
just,
do you define character?
there was just just a person of integrity, like a person who does what's right in the situation, regardless of whether it's easy or comfortable. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, this is the right thing to do in the situation. This is the moral thing to do in the situation. This is the noble thing to do in the situation. This is what we expect of you. Right? There was no version where she was like, no, that's okay. Or she was like, well, that's not the standard. But again, she lived it. And one of the things that I observe in my work now so much, because I work with so many different families and I'm obviously very much into the weeds with them as we navigate these really complex discussions, is, there's almost like two sides to this. There's what are the things the parents are trying to teach their kids, and some are teaching good things and some are teaching less good things. But the one consistent theme that I've seen the most in terms of how well it pans out when kids are adults is how in line are the parents' words with their actions. At the end of the day, kids will see through your bullshit as a parent. I have just seen that over and over again. And so if you're a parent who's barking orders at your kids all day long and trying to tell them to live a certain way and you're not, it will backfire, guaranteed. You are exponentially better off just being a normal, moderate person, but at least being consistent. And so when I reflect back upon my life and I see this consistency in my parents, in their behavior, their character, their integrity, their love to each other, their love to us, their love and commitment to their own faith, all these different things. I mean, I literally think I won the parenting lottery to have had both of them.
Coming back a second to speak about this immigrant edge, so to speak. This, I take personal responsibility for my life. I take personal responsibility for my outcomes. No one's coming to save me. I alone am responsible for the outcomes of my life. How has that mindset served you so far in your life?
I don't necessarily think I'm a complete lone wolf. There's no cavalry coming. It's much more like I'm the driver of this. I do believe that there are people around me who are in my corner and supporting me. I feel that way very much, of course, with my parents, with my siblings. I feel that way, of course, with my wife. And I have a phenomenal, group of guy friends and some female friends too, who are in my corner. Like I feel very, very blessed at this stage of my life to have been surrounded by some great people.
I think it's because you take responsibility for your life, right? You're not expecting anything of anyone, but you're surrounding yourself with great people who would give it to you anyways.
Yeah, that might be the case.
Observational.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and you're certainly qualified to opine that way. We've now become good friends over the last little while. Yeah, I mean, I would like to think it's because I'm willing to do the same for them that they're willing to do that for me. And I think you're right. I'm not walking around saying you have to help me. I'm doing every single thing I can.
Victimhood, right?
Yeah, I'm doing every single thing I can to try to navigate some situation, and then I'm going and I'm seeking wisdom from some really wise people. And I've really gone out of my way to try to surround myself with people who, and that sounds very cliche, but people who I think are better than me. And I know they're not necessarily better in terms of, every single aspect. I just mean, I look and I'm always like, oh, like if you look at my closest guy friends, it's like every one of them is like a superstar and a stud. And I often say, like I describe my guy friends as like high confidence and high competence, but low ego. So none of them have big egos. There's a humility about all of them, which I really value. So it's not some bravado fest. It's actually around guys who are really kind, really sweet, really humble, and yet very confident and quite driven. And all of my guy friends are driven in the same areas of life that I think are important. So all of them are good husbands, which is really cool. I don't think I have one single friend who doesn't value being a great husband. I don't think I have one single friend who doesn't really value and work hard on trying to be a great father. And then in addition to that, they also happen to be superstars of their chosen profession, phenomenal athletes, like all those different things. And so back to your original question is, I very much feel like I'm the driver of things. And I'm just a huge believer that you actually have to wake up in the morning and decide, what kind of life do I want to live? And be highly reflective. And then upon the reflection, decide where you're going to course correct and then take action.
There's people listening to this podcast who don't feel empowered in their life. Maybe that's learned behavior. Maybe it's they're going through something that's hard. What do you say to those people who maybe don't have the level of self-belief. Maybe they don't have the level of personal responsibility that you take on. And is there something Paul Attia would, like a broad stroke statement or a way to navigate those hard times to start taking back empowerment for your life?
Start small and get the reps where you can. Like anything. A step before that, because I think embedded in your question is this assumption that they're taking the time to think about it. But I find most people actually aren't even taking the time to think about, sort of, to use your language, getting control of their life. Most people, and again, broad statement here, so it's overly simplified, but most people wake up in the morning and are okay with life happening to them. It's that simple. And I mean, it's a metaphor that needs, continued development. But I often think a lot of people wake up in the morning and they're sitting in a motorboat, or they're sitting in a rowboat, and they don't even know they're in a rowboat. So where they land is just subject to the winds and the waves around. They don't even know that they're in a boat. They're just kind of floating around. And I think that's a lot of people. They're not even aware of where they're going, what's happening, what forces are driving them one way or another. And then I often think like the next version of people is people who are sitting in a motorboat, who at least say, I'm in a boat, and then they see where they want to go. So that's great. And then all they do is they rev their engine as fast as they can, like you would in a motorboat, to try to get to a certain spot. And that can work, and it can work for a while, but it usually has a lot of collateral damage because the only variable that you have is revving your engine. And then I think the third one, which is the most important spot to be in ideally, is I think being in a sailboat. And my father-in-law gave me that advice a number of years ago. He said, Paul, life is much more sailboat than motorboat. And I love that, and I've built upon that and think a lot about that, because what you do if you're sailing is the first thing you have to figure out is, where am I? Right? You have to actually have a sense as to where am I. So it requires a measure of internal reflection. This is a framework I use with clients all the time. So like, where am I? You have to actually pause and think. And if you think about, and I could go on about this, I won't, but how much time do people actually spend pausing and reflecting and actually asking themselves, where am I right now? In anything, in your relationship, in your health, in your fitness, in your finance. How am I in my thought life? How am I in my confidence? How am I in my patterns? Most people don't think about their internal process. Most people don't think about their system. So that's kind of point one, is like, you have to actually look at the sailboat and say, where the hell is this boat? Then you actually have to look at your destination and say, where am I trying to go? And again, I think if you ask a lot of high achievers, they'll say, I want to go here, here, and here, but they didn't do the first part. They didn't actually look at where they are. And then the next part is really fascinating, because the beauty of a sailboat metaphor is to recognize that you have to look at the winds and the waves. And then you have to adjust accordingly. And that's where I find people fail probably the most. And so back to your question, in terms of people who just think like, oh man, life's just happening to me, I'm not where I want to be. I mean, I think that the first step is, depending on what you need, and I see this with clients all the time, sometimes you need a pat before you get the punch, and I'm okay with that. So if what you need in that moment, and I have this with clients, if you're really down and you need a hug or you need a pat, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not the like, let's go, doesn't matter, no, there's a time to cry, there's a time to be sad, there's a time to mourn. I just had this conversation with a good friend a couple of weeks ago, and he was having this moment, late 40s, and thinking he hasn't landed where he wanted to land. And I said, you might need to mourn the dream and the vision you created for yourself at 22. And I said, there's nothing wrong with it. I said, you probably have to mourn it in order to metabolize it. And I'm a big fan of that. Like, I'm a big fan of, you have to metabolize the thing you're feeling. So, based on the question you just gave me, I don't know where that person would be at, but if somebody needs to actually mourn through that, metabolize through that, I'd say do that. Then once you mourn that and you metabolize it, then you've got to get to a spot where you say, okay, now, right? Who am I? Where am I? Where do I want to go? How do I get there? What's the next natural step to do that?
Tell me about your process for that. So personally, like, how do you operationalize building that into your life? Assuming people listening are doing really well, they're high achievers, and we're never going to stop wanting to do better, build more effectively, more efficiently. So how do you operationalize the reflection, the destination, and the wins?
Sure. So I'm very big on quiet time every single day. Yeah. That was something I don't know if I necessarily had in my life when I was younger. I don't know if I had that in my life in my 20s. I probably had a version of it somewhere. If I looked back or, watched a film of me, I probably found moments of it. But now it's like my most deliberate practice, along with exercise. So every morning, I've got young kids, but I'm usually up before my kids. I'm usually up before everybody. I was not a morning guy before, but I made myself into a morning guy. I was not a morning guy until I was about 30. Then I became one. And I literally, have a chair in my office, and I literally sit in my chair and I stare out the window. and I don't pick up my phone, and I don't talk to anybody, obviously. I don't let any inputs come in from the outside world. The only person that I want to talk to first thing in the morning is myself, because that's the person I need to know most. That's where it starts. I want to know and be comfortable with my own thoughts. And I don't have an agenda when I wake up and sit together. Sounds really funny, but spend that time with my own mind. Mm-hmm. But I need to be in touch with my own mind every single day. And sometimes it's chaotic and I have to let the dust settle. And sometimes I'm very focused on something. Sometimes I'll journal. Sometimes I'll use a meditation app if I want to. But that is something I do every single day. And that is my chance to just really, there's not a checklist per se. I think it's very intuitive for me. I just go through a sense as to where I am. And I might start on a micro. What am I going to do today? Or it might start on a macro, which is like, what am I doing in life? Where do I want to be? What kind of husband do I want to be? So that's the first thing.
How has that practice changed your life or influenced your life?
Yeah, no, it's everything, because I don't think you can really live a clear and organized life if you don't have a clear and organized mind. And I think most people are spending an endless amount of time worrying about so many external things and spending so much time either trying to get to know other people or trying to understand other people, and hardly any time trying to understand themselves and know themselves. Think about how much time, again, let's put people into buckets, and I like buckets of 3. So most people, we're just trying to get by day to day, right? It's tough. God bless you, that's very tough. Then you kind of have bucket 2, which is I'm now spending all this time studying gurus. I'm trying to figure, what does this guy do? What does this guy do? I mean, obviously your world, your former world of fitness, right? Like, okay, what's that person's routine? We're doing it in business. I want to listen to this person's business advice. So what's your routine? What do you eat in the morning? Where do you find your clothes? We're always trying to find that out. I don't think that many people spend nearly enough time getting to know themselves and really figuring out, really, who am I? Who do I actually want to be? And then how will I get there?
Is that the third bucket?
Yeah. It's spending time actually figuring out who you actually want to be. And so I just think it's one of the most important things in the world, because you need to actually really know yourself. You need to be highly reflective. And I just think it's something that is a bit of a lost art. And I would say that in today's day and age, again, oversimplification, it's harder than ever to do it for the obvious reason that there's an endless amount of distractions to distract you. And so there's no embedded boredom into our lives anymore. I mean, think about it. You and I are a similar age. You actually have memories of sitting in the back of a station wagon with your folks with nothing to do except stare out the window.
Right.
You sat on a bus for sports for 2 hours and there was nothing to do except stare out the window.
Right.
You stood in the grocery store with your parents and you just had to kind of look around and stare and we had embedded boredom. We also had embedded delayed gratification, right? All those things are kind of missing now. If I want to go find out a piece of information, I can go and get it instantly. If I want to be distracted, it's literally sitting in our pockets 24 hours a day. And so I'm a big believer that you actually have to be very deliberate to create quiet time. And I think that quiet time and reflection is what actually leads to your biggest leapfrog moments, because you get to know yourself and that's where something unlocks. And by the way, you might get 98% of the way there on your own, and then it might be a conversation with someone, or then it might be the external thing. It might be the podcast. It might be but you have to figure out who the heck you are first, or else the inputs won't matter. The inputs matter so much more when you have clarity on who you are.
Why is that?
Because you know what to do with them. Otherwise, I'm just getting hit with a ton of information. Right. And now how do I evaluate something unless I know what I want and know who I am?
Is that a perspective of I know what I value, I know what I don't value, I know what's important?
Yeah. And I know what I need.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden, just pick whatever example we want. I'm just sitting there and I'm almost like this clean slate. And now all of a sudden you present me with, do you want a red card? Do you want to be a bodybuilder? Do you want this for your business? Do you want marriage? Do you want to, whatever input is coming in at me, I don't even know how to evaluate those properly, because it sounds like such an overly simple thing, but nobody thinks about it this way. The value of something is based on what you value.
Right.
It's such a simple concept, right? So value is based on your values. That's how I describe it to my clients. And so at the end of the day, if you present me with something, I don't know what to do with that until I have the internal clarity on what I value.
Right. So my values can be based on my current situation, what I need in this moment, what I think is important and where I'm going. So like understand, sort of coming back to what you said, it's like know yourself, know where you're going, know the current winds and waves.
Totally. And then if you think about it, so, and there's a lot of simple examples. So we actually do know this from reps when it comes to like food. So that's why when somebody as an adult offers you something, so if I offer you something, you've now got 45 years of reps of knowing what you like and what you don't like food-wise, right? You have enough information to evaluate something. Hey, do you want this apple? No, I don't like apples. Do you want the banana? Yes, I like bananas. Just a very simple example. But take that and extrapolate it into what we're talking about here, which is other inputs in terms of where I went. So how do you make a decision about your job? How do you make a decision about how to allocate your time and your energy? How do you make a decision about how much you're going to pour into your kids versus talk to this person versus let this thing influence you and pull you in a different direction? It all comes down to the clarity that you have in your own mind of what you really want. And what I see in really highly driven people is that they have really high drive and generally lower reflection, because driven people are driven by momentum. We have, and I had that in spades. We have the dopamine hit. We want the next thing. We want the next thing. And what I have seen as a pattern for a lot of really driven people is they keep on achieving these milestones they set out to achieve, only to get there to realize that they didn't really want that thing in the first place. And it's sort of like the curse of the driven person. Yeah. And it's because they are, and I put it like on an XY, they are high drive, low reflection. And that's almost actually worse than low drive. Because if you're low drive, at least you're not perpetually disappointed that you did all the work to get somewhere you didn't want to be. For a lot of high drive people, they're like, I thought I wanted this. And they worked really hard to get it. They sacrificed a shit ton to get there, and they get the one really they didn't want it. I mean, I saw that a lot. I started my career off as a Bay Street lawyer, and I saw a lot of, you work your tail off to get partner only to realize like this isn't actually the life I wanted.
Right.
So just to finish on that point, that's why you have to spend the time asking yourself, what do I really want? What really matters to me? Who am I really?
One of the most common conversations I have now is literally that exact conversation from a perspective of what I now call the two mountains, right? So the first mountain for many people is this pursuit of external accolades, accomplishments, wealth, significance, whatever that may look like. And because I've transitioned away from bodybuilding and created a life, in my opinion, that's a greater level of success than I ever had in bodybuilding. People are like, well, how do you do that? Wasn't your identity tied up over there? How did you walk away? How are you not still like being pulled back into it? And so I have a conversation with a very large number of professional athletes, people who are leaving transitioning out of original direction. Like, what do I do? How do I navigate this? Because our identity is so tied up in the money, the significance, the identity that we had and we created that we thought we wanted. And I always talk about like the first mountain is about shining a light outside of yourself. Like I have to go prove myself. I have to go accomplish something. Yeah. And the second mountain is often for me about shining a light inside of myself. Like it's character creation, right? It's like, who am I? Why am I here? What do I value? What do I want to do in this world? And so I think for men anyways, in my experience, the first mountain is almost a necessity. I have to go out and accomplish something. I have to prove to myself that I'm a type of person that can do all these things just to realize that they don't matter at all and they're completely insignificant for most people. And the second mountain tends to be the one that, and there could be multiple mountains after that I haven't discovered yet. But for now, it's the second mountain of like, oh, this is way more significant than the first one.
Totally. So I love that. And I agree with it wholeheartedly. I'd make maybe like a couple changes to it though. The first thing I think is, I actually don't think it doesn't matter. It's meaningless. I actually think you have to check off that box.
Right. We have to.
So I think it does count for something. So if you're a highly driven, and I can't speak to females as much, but I think if you're a highly driven male, there is something that you're pursuing. You've heard me talk about this before, but you're a thoroughbred horse.
Yep.
And you've heard me say it, right? The story of the thoroughbred horse is they just need to run. And they start running and they run on the track and they start doing well. And when they start doing really well, everyone comes to them and says, you don't need to run anymore. Right? They're like, oh, you have enough money now. You have enough success now. You can retire now. You can do this. You can do this. Like I see this all the time, working with some unbelievably, like some extremely wealthy people. Their families are coming to them now. They're in their 60s and their 70s saying, you've built up all this wealth. Just come and chill out with us now. Come and spend the winters in Florida. Sell the business. Do whatever. And the thoroughbred horse says, like, what are you talking about? I was never interested in being like the other horses. So we have that mentality, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. You just have to know how to navigate it. So I do think you need to check off this box. I think where it gets dangerous is if you don't update your code partway through your life and recognize there's something else I need to be developing and working on. So if you want to call it mountain one and mountain two, I like to think about it in terms of external mastery and then self-mastery.
Right.
And so where I think and where I try to get my clients to spend some time, and I think where I've, spent a lot of my time, even in the past, certainly 10 years, but maybe even a little bit longer, but certainly the last 10 years, is focusing much more on self-mastery than external mastery. And so, yes, my version of external mastery, or my version of not pursuing external mastery, still from the outside looks like I'm a hyper intense focused person. My wife kids me all the time when she's like, man, you're pretty intense, you're very focused, you're crazy. Basically, I get called crazy a lot. I'm sure you do too. And I'm always like, oh God, you have no idea what a tame version this is.
Right.
Like, this is my domesticated. this is the doctor. This is the Diet Coke version. Quote Dr. Evil, right? This is the margin of evil. Like, this is the Diet Coke version of me. You have no idea how much I've watered down my crazy and my intensity, because I'm actually really working hard on self-mastery. I'm really working hard on trying to really understand who I am, what drives me, how to. My framework on this is called identify, manage, optimized. I've got to really identify the things that drive me, identify what I am. And if I can identify those things, then I can manage them. My version of management is I prevent them from causing harm to me or those I love. And then optimize is take these traits that I have that are very strong, and now I can optimize the shit out of them. So it all, to me, comes down to self-mastery. And my big invitation to highly driven people is spend as much time as you possibly can on self-mastery, even if you think it's going to take away from external mastery. And here's why. To your point, it doesn't matter how much external mastery you have if you don't have self-mastery, because when you get to the top of that mountain, you will feel empty. More importantly, or perhaps more compelling, if you dominate and win in self-mastery, you never fully win, you're never complete. But if you can start to win and make gains on self-mastery, external mastery actually becomes easier and faster and more sustainable.
And you recognize, if I master myself first, I can recognize that I'm on the right mountain. And the first, when external mastery comes along, you're like, because oftentimes people will pursue the wrong thing. They're
exactly.
Like,
you now know I'm on the right path. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I think most people either never realize that or realize it late. I think if we can put ourselves into bucket 3 of that, which is like, oh, can I get on that path early? Now you've got a shot, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I just don't, again, I you've heard me kind of say this in different ways, but I use different frameworks based on who the client is. So I don't have everyone has to do it this way, because I don't think humans work that way.
Right.
You wouldn't do that if you were training with someone, where you'd figure out what's actually bespoke to that person.
Right.
So for some people, they need 15 questions. For some people, they just need one question and to be left alone to think. And some people need a little bit of hybrid of both. But at the end of the day, it's actually spending time getting to know yourself and really understanding that, and getting to, I do like this framework, identify, manage, optimize. You got to really spend the time and identify. Most people don't know. They're just reacting to the thing, and they haven't actually identified the thing.
You're the king of framework. So maybe you can correct this one. So with my son, I'm literally playing the game of, hey, we're mastering the external. This is the first mountain. I know you must go through this. So I say there's 4 master skills for the first mountain. You master your body, you master your finances, you master your communication, and you master your emotions. And emotions is there because I think it's one of those that people get drawn into.
Yeah.
Of when things are hard, how do you respond? When things don't go your way, how do you respond? When someone's rubbing you the wrong way, how do you respond? Communication is both verbal and written. How do I communicate to get my outcome?
Yeah.
Obviously, financial is extremely important as a man.
Yeah.
And then mastering your body as the foundation for it all. So as I teach my now 13-year-old son how to ascend the first mountain of life, it's always through this lens of these 4 master skills. I'm curious what you
I love that.
have to say that.
I love it. I think it's great. And I think that, I think it has to come from you because it's to your son. Me just listening to that, I would twist that a little bit, turn it sideways, and I'd actually say there's a sequential aspect to that. And I would say if you actually get the emotional mastery and even the internal communication to users, but if you get the emotional mastery, it will guide the others, because our emotions are guiding us so much more. So I have a 13-year-old son as well, and I'm very big on teaching him how to actually identify the emotions that he's feeling and then give him the skill set to know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the classic example, and this ties back into your body and sports, is, for a 13-year-old boy, who are, competitive, they're nervous about something. So all of a sudden it's like, when that comes, let's teach yourself. I want you to understand what to do with that, which is great. I think that's a really, really good thing to learn as a young person. and to recognize, why am I nervous? Well, it's because I care. Like, you know the whole drill, right? I care. I'm interested in this, and how to actually channel that for good. Another one, and you and I talked about this one. I remember it was one of the stories I think we shared. One of our first conversations that you really liked is that moment that I had, not 12 feet from here in my house. It was the very first time I saw my two sons fighting each other. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
They were ready to kill each other. They were probably 8 and 9 at the time, maybe even a little bit younger. They're 16 months apart. And they'd always, had little fights here and there, but this was like, it got wildly physical. They were like animals that we couldn't, I had to literally physically get in there and rip them apart from each other and sit them down. And their faces were absolutely beet red from the rage and the aggression. And then they were almost like holding back tears. They were like little man-childs, I called them, right? They were like the aggression of the man, but the face of a boy. And what I saw in them was actually an element of shame over how they felt. And they were like, Dad, you don't understand. You don't understand. I wanted to kill him. And it was the first time they had ever experienced that rage that you probably remember as a teenager. I certainly remember as a teenager, where you just have this, what seems like unstoppable rage. And it was their first moment of experiencing that. And you could see the shame start to flood in of like, oh shit, I know this isn't good. I shouldn't want to murder my brother. And he's like, Dad, you don't understand. I want to kill him. And his other brother said, Dad, you don't understand. I want to kill him too. And I think they were thinking I was going to get them in trouble. And instead I flipped it around and I just said, boys, I just want you to know right now in this moment, I am not at all upset or mad at how you guys feel. And they almost like sat back and they're like, what? I said, I'm not mad at the feelings that you have. You're not in trouble for feeling this way. And then I said, I want you to understand why. And I don't know if you remember what I said, but I turned to them and I said, I want to ask you guys a question. I said, if your baby sister, little baby Coco, I said, if you were out hiking with her in our forest here and a coyote came and grabbed her, what would you do? Like, we would chase that coyote, like to get your sister. Like, what if you got tired? Like, what doesn't matter? We'd keep running. We'd keep running. We'd keep running. Like, what would you do when you caught up to that coyote who was holding your little baby sister and grabbed it? Like, we would do whatever it takes to save our sister and get her away from that coyote. And I said, exactly. I said, this rage that you have in you right now is the universe's gift to you. And I said, and it's for situations like that. I am so happy that you guys have this feeling. I am so glad you have it. And they were like, what? Right? And then I said, now my job as your father is to teach you guys how to be able to channel this in the right direction. I said, because the men who are controlled by this rage will end up divorced, unemployed, and in prison. And the men who know how to control it and optimize it and channel it in the right direction will become highly successful. And so I say all that, and then, you and I talked about this, is like, to me, particularly for a young boy, it's actually understanding what to do with my emotions and how to channel them in the right direction. Because I think the world is trying to make them binary. And so you have good emotions and bad emotions. And I'm a really big believer that, like, why are we calling them good and bad? Why don't we just refer to emotions as what they are? So sad isn't bad. Mad isn't bad. It's just an emotion. And now it's my response to it. So that would be my only change to that, is I really want them to understand that, because that will then lead to financial success, fitness success.
And so here's the nuance of that. And you and I spoke about this last time we were here. There's unbelievable amounts of individual variability in how we experience emotions, the amplitude, the sort of sequence of how we experience it, where we feel it in our body. And knowing that about genetics, which is literally, I can look at somebody's genes and go, you're going to experience it this way, is an unbelievably powerful thing. So some people, and there's another level to that, which I literally wrote about this morning, there's a level of safety that has to exist there, right? So imagine being a young man who experiences that and then automatically gets hit, gets ridiculed, gets punished. I no longer feel safe. So now when I feel that emotion, I maybe avoid it, or maybe I lash out and I get angry and I don't direct it to the right thing, but I was never taught in a safe environment that it's okay. So I become afraid of it. I become avoidant of it. And so many men in this world have learned the habit of avoidance of hard situations, avoidance of that emotion that I'm feeling. Something's wrong with me. Oh no, right? And so that there's so much opportunity within that. And I literally wrote about this morning. People who are successful, the guys that I get to work with and you get to work with, have learned that those emotions are their gift. It's your sword that doesn't have to come out at someone's throat. It's in the ground. I'm like, hey, I know what this is. I know what I'm capable of, and I know how to control it because someone along my journey taught me that you're safe. It's normal. this is your superpower, not you're a bad person, you should never do that, don't ever attack your brother. And so what an interesting crossroads in life for your boys in that moment, to empower them to be confident in themselves and who they are, and use that literal energy to direct it in some positive way. Whereas a lot of young children, young boys and girls, I'm sure, are shut down. And so that gift, that energy, that weapon that many of us are empowered with in varying degrees, the light gets put out.
Yep.
So for the listener at home, like the opportunity to reignite that flame, to realize that that's such an incredible gift. And however many years of avoidance of those situations and those emotions can be brought back to life if given the right mindset, the right environment, and the right direction, to realize it's your greatest gift in life. Literally, I wrote about this morning. The guys that I get to work with know that that's their gift. The energy that comes from fear, anxiety, worry, drive, it's all just energy, and we can transmute it in that direction. And the people who don't often lose because we avoid. It's such a powerful lesson.
It is. And I think to that point, we're talking about it as, the context of fathers being able to give this gift to our kids. And by the way, it's not just to sons. I have daughters as well. You have a daughter as well. Teaching my daughters the same thing, because it manifests in different ways, but it's the same idea. There's a drive. There's an energy that's going to come out in one way or another, and whether it's going to come out in this emotion or that emotion. I'm very big with my daughters as well to say, hey, I'm so happy that you have this. My eldest, I make this running joke that now I know what I would be like as a 16-year-old girl, because she has a personality that's so similar to mine, which is fascinating to watch,
right.
A 16-year-old girl version of myself.
How does that come out?
Oh, how much will I embarrass my kid by saying this? So, geez. Really, really skilled at arguments, really like highly argumentative and highly skilled at it, which I was too. Like I was like, going to law school was not a big surprise to anybody, because I was, naturally quite argumentative starting when I was like, 8 or 9 years old. And it wasn't even argumentative for the sake of being difficult. It was more just like, if something didn't make sense and wasn't logical, I would pick up on it really quickly. Like my mind just always, like I was in, Sunday school as a kid reading 5 verses ahead thinking, whoa, what they said 5 verses back there was not consistent with what they're saying over here. And the teachers didn't know what to do with me. But my mind just I always listened to things and put them on a flow chart and could automatically find the inconsistencies, which was very helpful when I, became a trial lawyer. So I see that. But the piece that's missing in a 16-year-old, and it was missing in me, and my daughter hasn't developed it yet, is the nuance of how the human condition actually works. So you see things much more black and white. So you have the intelligence to actually point out right and wrong and see it. And then you have the capacity to actually call someone out on it and cross-examine the shit out of somebody. But you don't have the life, wisdom, and compassion necessary to actually understand the world's much more gray than black and white. So that's how it manifests. So when that happens with me and my, teen daughter, and she's arguing with me or her mom, and we kind of say, no, like now we shut this thing down. Like we've flogged this horse enough, kind of thing. She'll of course do what any teenager will do, which is like, oh, okay, you just don't like my attitude. You just don't like, they just kind of like, that's a natural defense mechanism for people because they don't get what they want, and they're going to, give you an ad hominem attack and sort of attack us for not, liking that part of her. And I always say, are you kidding me? I love this trait in you. I don't ever want to see this trait go away. It's amazing. You just have to learn how to channel it in the right direction. You haven't learned yet you'll catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. You haven't learned yet the song and the art and the dance, right? Or the song and the dance kind of thing of how to actually massage someone to a certain outcome. You're a bit more blunt force trauma now. So anyway, but same idea though. I'm saying I love this trait in you. It's great. I don't ever want to see this trait go. It's fantastic. But picking up on that to this idea, we're talking about their kids, and you think about it in the context of your clients. I look at it as like, if we're in our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, at any age, I'm doing it with my clients who are in their 60s, some of them. And I say, it's like, we still have a chance. So even if your parents didn't give you this permission to be that way, or the skill set to identify, manage, optimize, we can now give it to ourselves. It just takes more work, right? And I've had to go through that. There's lots of things that I've had to sort of update my code on as an adult, where I've thought like, why do I think that way? Why do I behave that way? Why do I govern myself this way? Why did that make me insecure? And then I got it again. There's the reflective piece. Okay, this is the sailboat. Where am I and where do I want to go? What are the winds and the waves? And so again, it all comes back to this full circle of self-mastery. It's just this concept of like, how much time am I spending asking myself tough questions? How much time am I actually spending myself looking for the answers? And another piece, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's an important part of this, is how much time are you spending curating the right atmosphere around you of men who hold you accountable?
So important.
Right? Like, so I look at my good friends, you and I have talked about this, where it's like, man, I just want to be surrounded by honest brokers. And something that's really fascinating with highly successful people, and it's a very simple framework that I use. I call it ascending wealth, descending honesty. So the wealthier you get, the more likely it is that people around you will be dishonest for the obvious reasons, right? Mm-hmm. More people, once you're really wealthy, will start to rely on your income to support their lives. So now they have a disincentive to be honest with you if they think it's going to adversely impact them. There's also the halo effect. People think, oh, you're a successful guy. You've done this, this, and this. Whatever you're saying must be accurate and true. So even if I, in my mind, I'm like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm like, well, Ben's a successful guy, so I guess I should go along with it. And then the third part is, of course, as people become more successful, you start to, read your own press a little too much. So you start to think, I am kind of awesome. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I got shit figured out.
You've never said that to yourself.
100, right? And you get into this spot where you think, I've done really well over here. And so people have made, this is a big fallacy that I say, like it's a huge error. People overestimate carryover intelligence or carryover wisdom. So, of course, carryover strength from your world, right? People assume that if you're really successful at this, then I'm automatically a smart guy across the board. And it's like not even close to being true.
Right.
You might be like the smartest person over here. You might be a phenomenal entrepreneur. You might be this, this, and this. There might be an illiterate grandmother out there who's got way more life wisdom than you. And you have to be open to that to understand that. So all that to simply say, when I think about ascending wealth, descending honesty, as you get more successful in life, the need to be deliberate and extra deliberate about surrounding yourself with honest brokers only increases if you want to stay on the right path and optimize how your life's going to turn out.
The framework I use for the crossover transfer knowledge is, I think there's 3 components that have to be there. Again, I look forward to you adding on this. For someone to be an expert in something, there's theoretical knowledge, which is they have some ability to some, they've read the books, they've taken the classes, they've got the education. There's practical application, and there's authentically caring. And I think all 3 of those need to be there in order for someone to be classified as, a person of wisdom or experience in that space. So they may have 1, they may have 2. But if they don't have all 3, to me, it's like, okay, that person shouldn't be my authority in this area.
Yeah. I look at, so I like that. I have sort of 2 versions that I kind of think about when I think about this. The one you're talking about in terms of like, do I take input from this person? Is I kind of call it trust squared. So think T squared. And this is a great way to think about picking business partners and thinking just the people that you're surrounding yourself with. So the 2 aspects of trust are trust of character and then trust of competence. So characters, I trust who you are as a person, I trust your intentions, and then trust of competence is you're just competent to this. The example I give is, I trust my wife's character, but I wouldn't trust her to wire the house because she doesn't have electrical skills. Right? And I like my electrician and he's great to wire my house, but he might not be the person I go to for a character issue per se.
Right.
I think one step maybe removed from that and kind of a separate framework, just when you talk about wisdom and intelligence, because that's what we were sort of at. This person might be highly gifted here. This is a definition I actually heard from one of my good friends who remarkably said this while biking up a hill, like 6 hours into a ride one day, which is how intelligent this guy was. And I asked him, and the funny joke is he's a fitter cyclist than me. So we're in at the bottom of hills. I always ask him a difficult question at the bottom of a hill so he can start talking when I can kind of catch my breath. And I said, what do you think the difference is between intelligence and wisdom? Of his own volition had an amazing answer, which was intelligence is knowing how to do the thing right. But wisdom is knowing what's the right thing to do. And I just love that. Intelligence is knowing how to do the thing right, and wisdom is knowing what's the right thing to do. And the extreme example that I always come up with is like, a nuclear weapon. You have to be highly intelligent to know how to create a nuclear weapon. But you have to be very wise to know whether or not to press the right button.
Right.
And I love that. So when you think about that, there's a lot of people in the world who are really successful because they're highly intelligent, and yet they're not wise. So they know how to do something right, build a great financial portfolio, go to court, become a professional bodybuilder. Whatever the case may be, they figured out how to do that,
Yep.
which is great, but it doesn't mean they're wise. And so I'm really big with my kids and my clients, and of course myself, is like, oh, am I perpetually seeking wisdom? What am I doing to get wiser? Which is hard. It's a little bit nebulous, right?
Right.
But I think a big part of it is the self-reflection piece. And I think another part is surrounding yourself with wise people and then reading about wise people and trying to understand. In my version of wisdom is this idea of like how to make good choices. And making good choices and intelligence are not the same thing.
Correct.
There is an endless amount of people who are highly intelligent, who have been quote unquote highly successful in a number of things, who are not wise. And we see that manifested daily in the life decisions that they've made. So I would look at them and I'd say, oh, they got intelligence, but they may have not developed wisdom. And now we're going to go full circle. They've achieved external mastery, but they haven't achieved self-mastery.
Right.
Isn't that fascinating?
Is making mistakes a requirement to develop wisdom?
100% it is, but it's what you do with them along the way. So it's again, reflection, it's the observation, it's the course correction. So when you go through those things and you make mistakes, and we've all made lots of them, what's our process after that?
Yeah, it's almost like letting down the ego to acknowledge that the mistake has been made and it's okay.
Totally. And by the way, and I'll go full circle here on this, when we think about parenting, and we've talked about this a lot in many of our conversations, and I see it all the time at work, is like, how many mistakes are you going to be comfortable to let your kids make? That to me is one of the most fascinating things in the universe. Because every parent today, when I say every parent, I just mean probably your social circle, your clients, my clients, people are hiring me essentially to say, Paul, come in, we're we're uber wealthy family, and we want to hire you to make sure our wealth doesn't ruin our kids and our kids don't ruin our wealth. That's essentially my job in a nutshell, right? Yes, I'm going to navigate these complex decisions and discussions, but at the end of the day, the driving force is we don't want our wealth to ruin our family or our family to ruin our wealth. And so one of the big things that I'm often talking to my clients about is what's their interaction like with their kids? How they say, I don't want our family's wealth. We're worth a couple $100 million. We're actually billionaires. And we have kids now. We don't want the fact that we're a billionaire to ruin our kids. And so they curating and very, very, tightly wound, rightfully so and understandably so, to say, we don't want our wealth to ruin our kids. And so what they'll often do is try to prevent their kids from making any mistakes whatsoever, because they're so concerned that if our kids make mistakes, their life is destroyed.
Right.
And then they're going to get this, right?
Yeah. It's amplified.
Right. And so what I'll often say is, okay, but hold on a second here. How does a kid learn to walk? Right? By falling. Right? You look at your kid at 8 months old. What are they doing at 8 months old? They're grabbing onto this table. By 11 months, 12 months old, they're letting go of the table and they're kind of stumbling their way over to that chair over there. Right? And then they fall and they scrape their knee into that. And then by 13 months old or 12 or whatever, or if it's 4 months old because you had crazy quads as a baby, whatever the case may be, the kid learns to walk. And so you had to let your kid fall in order to let your kid walk. Okay? But what do we not do? If this fireplace is on, we're sitting right here so that the kid doesn't stumble into it and get their hands on it. If we're vacationing at the Grand Canyon, we're not letting the kid walk close to the edge of the Grand Canyon. So what we all know intuitively as parents is that the right way for your kid to develop is to let them make mistakes that are teachable mistakes, but non-catastrophic mistakes. We somehow seem to forget this as our kids get older. We almost overprotect them to prevent any mistake. It's like, no, let your kid make some mistakes. So with my clients, I say your kid has to actually learn how to actually spend money and actually learn the value of a dollar. And so if you're going to protect them from wasting money or spending money when they're in their 20s, how do you expect them to be responsible for hundreds, if not more, millions of dollars when they're in their 50s or their 60s? They have to learn along the way. You've got to let your kids make mistakes in order to develop. Now, non-catastrophic mistakes and creating opportunities for teaching and reflection.
Have you created a system in your business to help people navigate? Let's say my kid's grown up now. They don't have huge amounts of self-responsibility. They don't, they're not taking personal responsibility for their life or their outcomes. Maybe I bailed them out unknowingly. How do I start introducing that into their life? Is it just a conversation and hey, you're going to have to step up here?
It's many conversations. And what will fascinate you is it starts with you as the parent. So one of the big things, and you and I actually almost touched upon this, a few minutes ago, or maybe 40 minutes ago when we were chatting. The conversation starts with the parent, and where I go with it is I spend a lot of time talking to these really successful entrepreneurs, and I'll say, tell me your story. And as you probably know, most of these stories for really successful people almost sound the exact same. The archetype is the exact same, right? I had nothing, right? No one believed in me. I was sleeping on a futon. I was eating ramen noodles.
Yep.
The bank said no to me. It's some version of that, right? I slept in the back of my pickup truck,
Yep.
right? Everybody's story is the same. I was the underdog, and rightfully so. And then I pushed through. And look, lo and behold, I didn't give up. I believe in myself, and I found a way, and I succeeded. Fair? Would you agree with that archetype for the most successful? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I always say to the next question is like, okay, great. What does that story mean to you now that you're a 55-year-old really successful guy with hundreds of millions of dollars in this great business or whatever the case may be, right? Or you had this great career. And they're like, oh, this story is everything. What did it do for you? It gave me confidence in myself to overcome adversity. And then what do you think my next question is? Why do you want to rob your kid of that?
Right.
It's so tough, but we all have to do this as parents. We actually have to be willing. It sounds really tough, but you have to be willing to watch your kid suffer. And you have to be willing to watch your kid struggle for the benefit of your kid. And not just curated struggle, not just like, oh, no, he ran hard on the soccer field and I'm going to make him do extra laps after. I get it. That's nice. But that's curated struggle. Curated struggle is something very different than like, I can bail you out of this situation. And I actually want to, but I'm not going to. Because it's for your benefit that you actually need to literally sit in this discomfort. And I think, again, this goes back to this idea of like stillness and reflection and self-mastery. Most of us today have such a strong aversion to sitting in discomfort and an even stronger aversion to letting your kids sit in discomfort.
No, that's an interesting point. Is it an ego play? Because I observe some people, they're worried about what other people are going to perceive if their kids are failing.
100% it is. And I don't even know if it's necessarily just other people. I mean, the generous version of this is you really care about your kids and you hate to see them suffer. And I think that's the case for most of us.
Right.
Yes, I think another version of it is, oh, my kid's not starting. That's a classic example. Your kid, you think should be playing on whatever, pick whatever team. He should be playing on the hockey team. He should be on the soccer team. He should be starting. I think this is, but there's politics going on with this. You're a great example. With your stature as a professional athlete and with the connections that you have, if your son or your daughter was ever getting the runaround, that Ben Pakulski could come in and save the day. Correct? At some point, you have the skill set, you have the pedigree, you have the connections, you have the wealth, you have the force of personality. That you could walk in and get your kid's situation sorted out. You're going to have that dilemma one day. Because it might not be the best thing for your son or for your daughter for you to come in and save the day. By the way, I struggle with this too. It sounds arrogant, but like I don't lose arguments. I don't take shit from anybody. I can kind of make the universe bend to my will in most ways, right? Like I can kind of make things happen. And you have to sit back sometimes and say, nah, my kid's got to sit in this.
I also am blessed to have accomplished the dreams that I set out for myself. So therefore, I don't have any delusions of having my kids pursue my dreams. So I want them to struggle. I'm like, I'm not going to try to curate their path. I'm like, you're on your own path. So what a lot of people observationally, what it seems like a lot of people get pulled into is because they didn't accomplish their dreams, because they didn't get to fulfill their wishes, now all of a sudden they have to make sure their kids do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my kids are going to take their own path no matter what it is. I'm going to be there to support them, but I'm not going to try to make it easy because I recognize, as you say, the value is in the struggle.
Yeah.
The value is in the person you're becoming along the way. It's not in the destination, because I recognize the destination is their own. Your destination is your own. You're going to get there on your own. So I think so many observationally, so many parents who want to force their kid to become something was often because they're compensating for what they weren't able to do. I think it was, I forget who said it. I usually say it was Mark Twain, but it's not Mark Twain. Said children are cursed with the unfulfilled dreams of their parents. And I forget right now who said that, but somebody, important said that.
Yeah.
Which is like, I have no need for my kids to be anything other than happy, at peace, loved, fulfilled, and growing. I think I enjoy. And
probably, if I could add to that, because the happy one is an interesting one in terms of that.
Sure.
Because I think you may have remember saying this to me before, or you may remember me talking to you about this before. But it's funny. I've asked so many parents. I get hired by this really wealthy family and they want to navigate their conversations around wealth. And again, want to protect the wealth from ruining the kids and the kids from ruining the wealth. And I say, what do you want for your kids? And most people's token answer is, I want my kids to be happy. And then I'll kind of play a bit of a game with the family and I'll say,
it's always word.
Right. And I'll always say something like, okay, great. I talked to your kids and they're going to actually sell all the wealth and quit their job. And, they're going to be, they're going to go surfing in Hawaii for the rest of their lives because you've got enough wealth where they don't have to actually work. Are you okay with that? And the parents are always like, but they're going to be so happy. You told me you just want your kid to be happy. And they're like, okay, I want more than happiness. I'm like, great. Now we're being more honest about it. What do you really want? And at the end of the day, what we really want for our kids is for them to live a purposeful life. Some version of that word.
Sure.
But purposeful life, I would add to that, I want my kids to be their best at their best. That's what I really want. I want my kids to have self-mastery. I have different frameworks that I use. I talk a lot about I want my, and instill upon my kids wisdom, strength, and kindness. Because if I can give them wisdom, strength, and kindness, strength to make the right decisions, not just physical strength, but emotional and mental strength, wisdom to make good decisions, and then kindness and compassion so that to themselves and to others, you'll live a richer life if you have kindness and compassion over toxicity and resentment. I have another kind of version of this where from a skill standpoint, I want my kids to be philosophers, farmers, and fighters. Philosophers are going to be really, really deep thinkers. I look at farmers and I just think farming in the broad sense of like highly competent, right? In connected with nature, understand the world around you. I look at farmers as the ultimate like sort of jack of all trades where they're just like, they're a vet, they're a mechanic, they're a meteorologist, they're an entrepreneur, they're everything rolled into one person, right? And essentially we were farmers and fighters for our lives. So philosopher, farmer, and then fighter is actually know how to fight. Because I think you have to know how to fight to be successful in this world. I think you have to know how to fight to be really rich in this world. And I don't mean rich financially, I mean to live a rich life. You have to know when to stick up for yourself, when to fight for your family. You have to know how to fight effectively, both physical, mental, legal, whatever that case may be. And you have to know when not to fight. So I'm a really big believer. So I think about that when I think a lot of my kids. I want them to be philosophers, farmers, and fighters. So I want that for them, and I'll do my best to try to give them that. I could go on about that, but that's just it's such an important way to think about it.
What's your framework for philosophy? So you have a framework for everything. How does that fit into philosophy?
So what does philosophy mean? It means the love of wisdom, right? So at the end of the day, it is just like the love. That's literally, what the word means. And so I want my kids looking at the world around them, trying to understand it as best as possible and learning from it. This sounds so cliche and so after school special, but I can't help but like feel this way. But it's this idea, it's one of my very simple principles and frameworks, which is like the world is an amazing teacher, but you have to choose to be a student. Again, it's so cliche, but there's just such a great opportunity for us to like learn. Like, I learned from watching you, I learned from nature, I learned from myself. Are you asking yourself questions, or are you just existing moment to moment and not even thinking about it?
You probably haven't told you this. Do you know that I started writing children's books and I never published them, but I write them. And they're all the wisdom of. So it's the wisdom of the moon, the wisdom of the sun.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. You should definitely publish them.
Well, I sit with nature so often. And sometimes it's the wisdom of the bird, right? The wisdom of the bird's song. Or you're just like sitting there and you're like, there's so much wisdom in the most subtle, nuanced things. The hummingbird, and if you just like spend time with those things, I think so few people get the opportunity or create the opportunity to spend any amount of depth with the moment, right? With this moment. There's so much wisdom within everything that we're experiencing all the time.
Yeah.
So every time I go to Costa Rica, I'll sit down and write like a few pages
of a
book. Yeah.
No, you should definitely publish them. I think we need that. Again, I think that, the pursuit of wisdom in many respects is a bit of a lost art in modern society. And yet
so much distraction, not enough depth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and there's probably lots of different reasons for it. Also, this is switching directions here a little bit, but I think about this a lot. The ants go, of course, to where the sugar is. The decathlete trains to the 10 events and the point system that they're led to. You as a bodybuilder trained towards the point system. So you sat there, mapped out your training program, knowing what the scorecard was, correct? We all work towards the scorecard. So if you think about how society, Western society, our modern day Western society, we don't actually really create a high point system for a lot of things that actually should have high points. So the simplest example I like to use is, when was the last time you heard someone publicly rewarded for having a stable family life? I mean,
personally, always.
but no,
Like, it's
but publicly.
right.
Like when was there a last, I mean, use the cliche example, like when was there a trophy given on TV for someone who had a stable family life?
Right.
When was the last time you heard an Oscar speech about somebody saying, and this guy is phenomenal at his job and has happened to be married to the same woman for 25 years and is a really generous, present, wise father?
Right.
We don't. I mean, we just, it's not something that we talk about. What's interesting is externally, we don't really reward a family stability. But internally, we all desire it and we all envy it when we see it. So it's really fascinating. Everybody, I mean, I've interviewed so many different people, but what do you really want in life? Like what actually really matters to you most?
Stable.
And at the end of the day, we really want a stable family. And what do you want? I mean, it's again, it's such an obvious thing, but no one thinks about it. What do you really want at the end of your life? You really want a stable family, right? Everybody, you talk to them, like, what do you want your dying breath to involve? And it's like surrounded by my loved ones. And you want no regrets with respect to your loved ones. So I simply say that to think about this concept of like, when you say we're distracted, we don't pursue wisdom, it's like because we haven't indexed as a society to say, these are the things that we should be pursuing.
In your observation, when did that shift? Because I would suspect in the 50s, that was the reality. People were acknowledged for like, hey, that was the goal.
Yeah.
Right. And you could maybe even argue that in other countries that's still the goal. Right, that's the gold standard. I'm not sure, but somewhere along the way, value shifted to the individual, materialism, accolades, external gratification.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not a historian. I don't know. I would guess it was probably a lot before that. I would definitely say there's been a hockey stick kick up in the last even 15 to 20 years in terms of obviously everything we've seen from social media, in terms of what people are really spending their time and energy trying to get. So now most people are trying to spend their time and their energy getting kudos. They're trying to get versions of external validation more often than not from strangers. I mean, that to me is one of the biggest paradoxes that I see every day. And I, as you know, have built my entire business without using the internet. So, I will now start in the next year or so using social media, but I haven't used social media. Again, we make this joke that I don't even know what the Google is. Like I'm still trying to figure that out. Like what is the Google?
What's the Google?
What is the Google? It's a funny line for my dad, but I still don't know what the Google is. But I know when I started my business, it was about 10 years ago, and I kind of had developed this, and I said, I'm now actually going to go and help really wealthy families navigate this really critical and complex intersection of family dynamics and family wealth. And I shared that with a few people, and they said, you're going to go do this? Okay, if you want to get into these circles, you've got to go out and have like the biggest social media presence, and you've got to do this and this. And I remember looking and doing a bit of research on it and kind of like looking at other people. And about 3 days later, I was just like, this looks like the worst thing in the universe. I can never do that.
Right.
I was just like, wow, I just feel like everyone's just created this online avatar to try to create like faux legitimacy. And I was like, wow. And so I remember literally wrestling with that. I came back kind of from that like 3-day period, and I just wrote down in my journal how I'm going to build this business. And it was really simple. It was rule number 1, offer the absolute greatest value I can to the one person in front of me. And then rule number 2 was never be a jackass. And that was it. And that was like, those are the only 2 principles in my company. It was like offer the greatest value. And I literally was like, I don't care if it's a barista or a billionaire, you're offering value to the person in front of you. Ask yourself, Paul, how can you offer value to this person in this moment? Do that, never be a jackass. And I remember thinking, if I can do that, I'll probably be able to build a business. And I did, which I'm really thankful for. So the only reason I say all that is when you think about like our pursuit of wisdom versus other things, the world has really changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years with so many different people wanting external validation more than they ever have. And I think it's to the detriment of internal validation. Right? And you think about what's like the corollary effect of not actually seeking internal validation. I mean, it just seems so painful to me to think about how much effort it would take to be perpetually out there wanting everyone else and their mother to give you a thumbs up and to like you. And one of the big observations that I've made is people will spend so much time trying to get strangers to like them, and almost always to the detriment of the people who will actually be at your funeral. It's wild. I want all these strangers to accept me and to like me. And meanwhile, to get it, I'm ignoring the one group of people who actually give a shit about me the most.
And I don't like myself, and I don't my family doesn't like me. I don't have a great relationship.
Yeah.
But everyone else thinks I'm great.
Yeah, or I want them to, or they're pretending to. And of course, we could deep dive on that, because even people thinking that you're great is not actually thinking that you're great, because it was no effort for them to do that. I mean, that's another, we're going in a different direction here, but that was another thing. I remember kind of learning that. I struggled with this as a husband, not with social media, but I remember as a young husband and young father, and I can tell you that the moment that it all came together for me is I went through a period, and we had, as you know, my wife and I deliberately, but crazily, had 4 kids in 4 years with no twins. So it was a really, really intense period of my life. So on my 30th birthday, I was not even married. Wasn't even engaged on my 30th birthday. I was dating my now wife, and then by the time I was 35, I was a married father of 4. So between 30 and 35, it was pretty intense. And we chose to do that, and I loved it, and I love having a big family, but I was 100% not ready or not wired for that level of intensity and that level of commitment to a domesticated life.
Paul Attia wouldn't do it any other way.
I think it is in line with my personality. Totally. Very intense, fully in, out over my skis, whatever metaphor you kind of want to use. But I 100% was like, holy shit, this is a big change. This is a big transition. And so I would say my addiction to exercise really increased during those years. And I'd like to be able to say it was just because of my desire to stay healthy and fit, which was part of it. But I think part of it was also fitness became a justifiable escape from the reality of, the constraints and the responsibility of having a young family. And so exercise was that.
You just sort of gloss over that like it's normal. Says the guy who trains 5 times a day, has 5 children and multiple businesses. Like it's not you're like, oh, it's just what I do, but it's not a normal, maybe it's not common, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to just gloss over that. It's like, it's just what you do. You just need to train more when things become stressful. Like for most people, it's the opposite, right? It's like, what's the instant gratification that I can escape with? How can I avoid these emotions that I'm experiencing? How can I avoid these hardships and mute my mind and turn down the experience rather than like amplify my ability to tolerate the experience or amplify my ability to navigate the experience? Not a common path, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it might be. That might, again, back to the top of the conversation, that just seemed normal for me.
Right.
Like I wasn't spending time thinking that. I mean, I make those observations almost after the fact. I'd sort of realize that how many fathers have young kids and go from, being a pretty active guy to then suddenly not. And I was like very keen on like, that's not going to be my story. It can't be my story.
The way you do it is really worth talking about, right? Because like, it's not like you're doing, I'm going 45 minutes to the gym and doing a 2-hour workout. You have this beautiful setup where you're like, hey, I have these little almost micro workouts spaced throughout the day. That's, you've built a life intentionally. Going back to all of your principles, like I sit down, like what's important to me?
Yeah.
How do I curate my environment so that it's going to suit my outcomes?
Yeah. Yeah. The big change there was when I went from, and I had it happen kind of twice in my life, but I went from I was really fortunate to be playing on 2 varsity sports while in law school. So, did Division I football, went to law school, tried out track there a little bit too. But workouts for me then would have been very similar to your version of a workout, which was like 4 hours. Like it was just all the time in the world to exercise.
Right.
That was the first, rock in the jar. That was the first thing I did. That was it. And then by about 27, I'm now practicing law. I now had to work, 60, 70 hours a week, billable time. So I had to update my code on what a workout was. But I still worked out once or twice a day. I'd usually do something in the morning or at night. And then I'd always go to the gym at lunch as, a Bay Street lawyer. And then even when I became a criminal prosecutor, did the same thing. What changed when I had kids, sorry, go ahead. You were going to ask a question. No, so what changed was, 4 kids in 4 years. Suddenly now, to your point, I no longer had a 4-hour window to go to a gym. I wouldn't have even had, as you said, the drive to a gym or whatever. So I just made a commitment really early on that I'll never miss a workout. And so what I had to do then is I had to update my code on what defines a workout and how will you get them in. And so my wife and I, actually, it's still kind of like our funny joke is, you hear like push presents, like you buy your wife a present when she's her push present was a treadmill and then like a weight cage. And so we were just like, we just sat down and had the conversation when she was expecting our first. And we said, okay, what's our workout schedule going to be? Because she's an athlete and she was like, she wanted to keep working out. And we lived in a tiny little post-war bungalow. And we just built the most kick-ass little gym setup. It was tiny, but it was like a weight cage and a treadmill. And I always have a jump rope with me. Like whatever is available, I'll kind of use. And so we just sat there and kind of did that. And then over time, as we added babies which sounds ridiculous. We just added a piece of fitness equipment. And then over time, I just kind of evolved things. So by the time that we had our fourth kid, I can tell you exactly what my like physical setup was, to your point. I basically made the decision to set up my life so that I would never have an excuse to not exercise, period. So I had a doorway pull-up bar in the kitchen. I had a doorway pull-up bar in the baby's room. And then I had a gym in the basement. And then in my office at the courthouse, I had dumbbells and I had resistance bands. And then at one point I brought in like a full pull-up and dip bar and just stuck it in the courthouse. And then I just made sure that my commute to work.
There are photos of this?
Yeah.
I need photos.
And then I just had, I just made my commute to work. Like the running joke is my wife, I was a lawyer and I was, a prosecutor. She never saw me in a suit for 10 years because my commute to work just became the workout. So I would bike, run, or skate to work year round. We lived on, near the canal in Ottawa. And I would just shower and change at the office, or sometimes not shower and sometimes change, you know what I mean? But the point was there was never going to be a day where I wasn't going to do something. And I just had a Rolodex of options. So if I literally had 12 minutes, it'd be a sprint and then like pull-ups in the office. If I had 45 minutes, I had a route where I'd go south and there was a set of hills in this like arboretum and I'd run the hills. And then there was a tree and I would just be like, I can do 15 pull-ups in this tree, whatever it was. And then I would just start setting goals. And then other people started to follow. And so the point was, it was never going to not happen.
It's interesting because somebody presented me with this exercise recently. And it's like, if you had 10 minutes, or maybe if you had 1 minute,
Yeah.
all the freedom in the world to do anything you want, you had 1 minute, what would you do? And if you had 10 minutes, with all the freedom in the world to do anything, what would you do?
I like that.
And if you had an hour, what would you do?
Exercise-wise or just?
No, anything.
Oh,
so
okay.
if I literally had a minute of free time, 10 minutes of free time, an hour of free time, a day of free time, and then a week of free time, how would you choose to fill that space? And I know exactly what the answer is for you. I probably know what the answer is for me, but I suspect many people would answer that with a very broad range of answers. And it may be a useful experiment to play with and be like, oh, maybe I could take that 10 minutes and do my pull-ups, or I could do my jump.
I like that question a lot. Yeah, that's really good. I would add like a couple layers to it. So like, okay, if it's like one, ask that question and then do it like with exercise. Like, what would you do with exercise? Okay, who would you spend it with as a person? So that's interesting. And then what would you do if it's like, because what jumps to my mind is like end of my life, I have 1 minute left in my life, or just 1 minute of spare time today? Because that would change it a little bit too.
Of course.
But I like that. Yeah. By the way, remind me, I can pull it out if it's okay. I have a couple other like reflective questions that I actually just used these last week with a client, but I've shared them now with a few different people. People have liked them. But just these self-reflective questions is like a route to self-mastery. But just to finish, I want to finish the workout thing only because you raised it. And then I want to go back to the point that I was going to make in terms of like getting the approval of others versus getting the connection with the people that matter most. Because that's where I had begun on that. So the exercise thing for sure, it was, there's an example of, we talked earlier about identify, manage, optimize. I'm a highly, obviously neurotic person. I probably have, addictive trends in me. I have this personality that like hones in and focuses in. Recognizing that at a young age and channeling it for good has helped me so much in life. I think about how much of a destructive force that otherwise could have been in my life. My personality type could either make me a phenomenal father or a terrible father. Mm-hmm. My personality can either make me an amazing husband because I'm wildly committed to my wife and to my kids, or it can make me a terrible husband who abandons his wife in the interests of not pursuing another woman, but pursuing my own life mistress, which is work.
Yeah. I
am 100% a workaholic. I love productivity and I'm fueled by it. And so recognizing in myself early enough that I am really, really intense and really focused and have this like laser beam focus in on something was really helpful, because I had to work really hard to channel it, to say, I probably wasn't wired to be a 2020 dad. I often say I was wired to be a 1920s or earlier dad, right? Whereas I'm being evaluated on how much can you provide and protect your family, not being evaluated on how present are you with your family. Mm. And my wife and I talk about this, right? This natural drive I have in me to be like, okay, so all I have to do is provide and protect for my family, and I can just like leave me out in the woods for 20 hours a day and just let me have my time.
You crush.
Like I'm very, very wired for that. Like I'll mail checks back home and I'll protect the village. I'm really fucking awesome at that. That's where I'm actually at my best.
Yeah.
And so to sort of recognize that like, oh, there's another side to fatherhood, and obviously I've really had to wrestle with this, and that can be a whole other 6-hour conversation in of itself. But to really kind of figure that out, and this all goes back to this idea of like, are you constantly self-correcting? Life is a sailboat, not a motorboat. Are you surrounding yourself with honest brokers? Are you asking yourself really tough questions and genuinely and honestly looking for the answer? And are you doing the big thing, which is roll the clock forward to my kids graduating college, roll myself forward to their wedding date, roll myself forward to my funeral, and ask myself, like, who is it that I actually want to be? And I've written this out. How do I want my kids to describe me? And these were some of the big turning points for me to go from the guy who just wants to be a workaholic and say, I checked off these boxes, I'm a good guy and I provided for my family, to be someone who's like, oh, I actually want like meaningful, ongoing relationships with all 5 of my children and with my wife. That won't happen by accident. None of this happens by accident. Just like fitness or wealth doesn't happen by accident. I was like, I've got to be really deliberate about this, and I have to be deliberate now, not try to play catch up after the fact.
You said something really interesting there around the 1920 dad versus the 2020 dad, because I suspect, I literally had this exact same conversation this week, as you're vaguely aware of. I had the same conversation. I was like, this is, for me, my natural tendency. Like, I'm really good at what it would have been in 1950 or 1920 or before that, to do all those things. I'm like, yeah, that to me checks all boxes. But now you're like, oh, but we're living in a different time where people have different levels of expectations, and there's so much nuance within expectations in a relationship, right? Like our relationships of the future more challenged because of the intricate nuance that could exist in relationship dynamics. Like, you want these little specific things because, people's expectations are molded by what they read, what they consume, what they watch.
And by their peers.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're like, it's so interesting to navigate old biology, modern operating system. How do I make these things intertwine? I literally had that conversation this week. It's great you brought that up. So how do you encourage men listening who say, man, I'm doing a really good job at provide, protect, whatever else comes with biology?
Provide and protect versus presence, right? And we joke in my family about how we have productive Paul versus present Paul, and there's a huge dichotomy. That's like my split personality. And we talked about this before too. I know where it comes from for me. I remember telling you this, and you were like, I'll tell you actually what you said in response, because I thought it was brilliant. But I told you one day that when I think about my upbringing, my father, if you asked him what's a good day, it would be like 16 hours of productivity.
Yeah.
My dad was very, very much wired for productivity. And like I said, he lived, 87 years, was the most productive person I've ever met up until the very end. And if you asked my mom, what's a great way to spend 16 hours? It would be if she sat at the kitchen table and was able to sit with you and offer you help in a really complex area of your life and be, relational and emotional support. That would be a great day. And I think I shared with you, I feel like I ended up with not 50-50 my parents, but 100 and 100. I have both of those in me in spades. And when I figured that out, which was in my 30s, it helped unlock so much of me, because I understand that I had these 2 driving forces where I'm like wildly productive, but also just love relationships and impact, interacting and having deep connection with people. And your words to me when I told you that, I thought were really smart. You said, wow, that must be a really hard thing. There must be a lot of internal battling as to how to allocate your energy, which I thought was bang on. And it took me a lot of years to figure that out. And so this is the long way of answering the question, which is like, you have to really lean into what your natural tendencies are, and you have to be super honest. You have to be willing to accept all the parts of you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It took me a while to kind of even admit, oh, I am 100% a workaholic. It took me a while to be like, I fucking love work. I enjoy being productive. It brings me such joy. I had to really be honest, because I didn't want to be like, no, you're not a workaholic. And look, how deep do you want to go, right? Should I get the psychiatry chair out? Like, my dad, of course, hardworking immigrant. You have moments in your head where you're like, I love my dad and he's amazing, but he worked a lot. I'll be different than that. Oh my God, I'm more like him than I thought. Right? So you have that. And then the other side of me was sort of this like, oh my gosh, my mom just wants to sit around and like talk to people all day, but like, that's not productive. Shit, I really enjoy, sitting around and talking to people all day. And I love meaningful relationships, but shit, is that really productive? So you have to really be able to face all of your sides and be honest about it. And then say again, identify, manage, optimize. How will I optimize this? So how I've navigated this as a husband is number one, I've been really honest about it, and that's taken some time. I've talked about it to a lot of my good friends, and I've sought the input of wise people. And I've tried to look for really good role models. So the role models that I have found when it comes to fatherhood are guys who, and I am very particular about this, they have to be crushing it in all realms that I think are important.
Completely.
And so if you look at like the men that I've looked up to, like my dad and my late father-in-law, I look at these guys and, my late father-in-law, I don't know a guy who did it better. I don't think. He was an Olympic athlete, went and got his PhD in English Lit from Stanford, then became an entrepreneur, did really, really well, then published a bunch of books. Like the guy just crushed it in every single part. As far as like that, we talk about the mountains or the external, he did all the external things. And yet, miraculously, was somehow also a phenomenally gifted husband and father. And he didn't just look the part. I know it. I'd been, married to his daughter for almost 2 decades and know his family really, really well. And so I spent a lot of time with him just, asking him, like, how did you actually do this? And so he's a guy who I think was highly reflective, a philosopher by nature, spent a lot of time thinking about who he wanted to be and how he wanted to live. And he was very organized with his time and lived very much in line with his values. And he also had the chip that we talked about where he wasn't waking up in the day asking himself, how can I be accepted by everybody around me? He was spending a lot more time thinking, how do I want to live my life? So there's just an example. But so, it's a lot of time in deep reflection, surrounding yourself or looking for good mentors. And all of my close guy friends today, every one of them is like a very committed husband, very committed father, but extremely driven people who are unbelievably committed to their athletics and their profession and their friends and the community things that they're involved in. And all of them, I think, have the same struggle that I have. And it's almost like our own little support group for each other. And what's super cool is there's this perfect balance with my close guy friends of, I would say, accountability and encouragement to do the right thing. But it's also mixed with like compassion and acceptance for being who we are. So I can call up one of my friends and I'm like, man, did I screw up today? He's like, what? I'm like, man, I told my wife I was going to do this. And, I ended up working out for 4 hours, even though, because I just needed that so badly. Work was stressful. I just know I needed to be in the woods on my bike, that sort of thing. And then my wife was like, yeah, but you're kind of late for this. And when she gave me grief, I was like, don't you know who I am? Don't you you go to the Rocky Balboa speech, like, don't you know, Adrian, you married a fighter, right? Like that sort of, I can have that moment where I can call one of my good friends and I can say that, and they're so good at simultaneously being able to say, I totally get it. Mm-hmm. They don't look at me like I have 7 heads. They don't think I'm speaking for, they're like, oh man, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then they'll be able to kind of say in the moment, and I do this with them and they do it with me, like, hey, I get it. It's okay. You're trying your best. Dust yourself off. Go apologize to your wife. Go make it up to your family. Do a better job. Right? Or they can say, yeah, I understand why you do. Like there's this perfect balance of like compassion and understanding, but also a little bit of a kick in the ass and say, now go back and do the right thing.
Yeah.
So that to me is huge. You've got to surround yourself with people who share that value and give you the pat punch that you need to do the right thing.
Yeah. Very high level of self-awareness, very high level of consciousness, can navigate those things situation by situation.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I talk to my wife openly about it. Like I'm really honest, like she's amazing and she really recognizes this trait in me. And one thing that we've both really worked on is understanding that all the good that people like in me and all the good that people have benefited from, whether it be my clients, my close friends, or of course my family, that drive has this other side to it. And I've been really honest. And you could pick whatever metaphor you want. There's a million different ones, but it's like, you can't say, I love having a German Shepherd because it protects my property so well, but man, it sheds and it's big and it has sharp teeth. It's like, that's a fucking German Shepherd.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like if you want a dog that doesn't look scary, don't get a German Shepherd. If you want a dog that so it's not a justification. This is, I think, the most important piece. This is not an invitation to say to your spouse or to your kids or to your coworkers, hey man, this is who I am. I'm not harming anybody. I'm doing okay. Let me be. That's the lazy man's way out. It's a more nuanced version, which is like, hey, this is what I am. This is how it manifests. I'm becoming increasingly aware of it, and I'm always working on trying to improve it. I will never be perfect at it. I am trying my best to take these traits, this intensity that I have, this addiction to work or exercise, whatever it is, like all of your clients are highly driven people, and say, I am highly driven. I'm not ashamed that I'm highly driven. I'm trying to channel it in the right direction. And as I figure that out, how it manifests day to day is not always going to be the same because I'm not a prescriptive robotic person. It's this organic entity. And at least for me, I can honestly say I can't always predict how my intensity is going to manifest day to day or week to week.
One of the things that comes up that it seems like you don't navigate, I could be wrong, but it seems like you don't navigate is sometimes that because you're 100% your dad, 100% your mom, there's a dissonance, there's a pull. There's like, I want to do this and I want to do this. For many people listening, I suspect that manifests as an anxiety. I'm not doing this. Like, the rumination of like, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I'm not doing this. That becomes this ruminating reality, this ruminating existence that turns into an anxiety.
Yeah.
You ever experience that? And I think that's a really interesting, challenging thing for some people to navigate. If you're living in a way that's out of alignment with what you know you should be doing or want to be doing, there's an agitation that happens inside. You're like, I don't know how to navigate what I should actually be doing, what's more important. So I suspect there's people listening who go, yeah, but I do that and this happens.
Yes, no, I have that. And I've had that for years. And I think agitation is a perfect word. I think it's actually, I call it like a very unsettled soul.
Yeah.
I 100% have that. The reason you're not hearing me talk about it as much today, if you'd interviewed me 10 years ago, it would sort of, 10 years ago, I may have not even be able to articulate it. 5 years ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's my whole life. I 100% that, which is why, by the way, when you said to me, oh, wow, it must be hard to figure out how to allocate your energy, I was like, oh, very insightful. The difference is now my feedback loop, my cycle from that feeling to resolution is exponentially faster. That's the reps and the deliberate reps. And that's something I would just really invite people to like work on. That has been really cool. That is you talk about what's the value of the time alone, what's the value of like the deep dive conversations with your spouse, with your close friends to really understand that. Yeah, so I will have that. I had it this past weekend, long weekend here, last weekend of summer for the kids. I kind of have this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to be like my mom's side's going to take, I have this vision of I'm just going to be chilling with the kids. And then all of a sudden, your phone blows up and stuff happens and you feel this need to respond. And then you look and it's a short week. And all of a sudden you're like, what? It's a short week. I've got this. Like you have that overwhelming feeling of all this work has to get done. And let me add a little sidebar here because this is really fascinating. Do you know what it is to me that I think like is kind of how I view this? Do you know what it is that makes people highly successful in life, externally successful? In my mind, it's their ability to take shoulds and make them into musts. Mm-hmm. Really, really successful people, externally successful, make shoulds into musts. Better than anybody. My wife said to me, I've never once said I should exercise today. She said, I've never uttered those words. I've always been like, I have to exercise today. Right? You never said I should do legs today. It's a leg day.
You just do it.
It wouldn't matter if the gym was on fire. Correct. You're doing legs in the parking lot. You're going to find a pickup truck and you're going to do deadlifts with it. Right? And so if you think about that, I think it's a great trait. Now, it's a really bad trait if manifested poorly.
Right.
And by the way, when people take I'd like into must, that can be really bad. That's how I think you can get true addiction with substance abuse, right? I'd like to do this and now I must do this as opposed to I'd like to. So I know that about myself in terms of I make shoulds into musts. And so I think about even just this past weekend and many moments in my life. Now the difference is when I start to feel the anxiety or, use your word, the agitation rise up, I can actually see it change my behavior. Now I walk through the house from my office to the kitchen and I'm no longer a guy who has 30 seconds or 2 seconds to pause for a kid. I'm a man on a mission. And I'm like, oh shit. And you kind of watch yourself and you change the energy of everybody around you.
For sure.
Because all of a sudden they're like, oh. And by the way, let's be very honest. As a male, particularly a guy with a square jaw, big neck, a guy your size, you're actually an intimidating force to people around you without even realizing it because we don't even actually recognize our physicality. But when you're walking fast and kind of agitated and kind of this, it changes everybody else around you. So you need to become aware of it because it's actually not the energy you actually necessarily want to create in your home. Anyway, so now what I can do is what I will often do is I will find a way to figure out what do I need in this moment to get the pause and the clarity I need to decide how I allocate my time. And then I just have a bunch of different levers that I can pull. So I literally might go do something hyper productive for a really short period of time because that's just going to scratch the itch. Mm-hmm. And that might literally be like jumping on the tractor and doing something that was on my list of things to do that weekend and I just need to get it done. It might be cleaning my kitchen. It might just be, I just know I need to exercise and I'll be better. And then I go back to that Rolodex of exercise. So I've got a bunch of 20-minute workouts that I can do, 3-minute one. Like you give me 3 minutes, I'll give you a workout. You give me 30 minutes, I'll give you a workout. Right. It might be that. It might actually be I need to go sit in my office, shut the door, and just catch my breath and sit for 5 minutes.
Tell me about the state that happens from the point of agitation to the point the workout's done. So I'm very curious because, my brain's going to I want to understand the physiological mechanism behind it. So is there literally a palpable, notable shift that you can feel from hey, I feel agitated and distracted to okay, now I did my 10-minute workout. What does that feel like to you?
Yeah, you're totally right. So the time span of that for me throughout my life has been as short as less than a minute to as long as several hours.
What's the feeling?
It's a release almost. It's just like a calmness.
What's the pre feeling?
Oh yeah, the pre feeling is an agitation. You're
is it mental or physical?
The agitation?
Yeah,
mental. Yeah, there's almost
a rumination, almost like a speeding.
I just call it I'm unsettled in my soul. That's the only way I can describe it. I'm just unsettled. I'm all over the place. You're not, and you see it when you see it in kids, right? They're not calm. You see it when you see it in a dog too.
Sure. And then on the other side of that is
yeah, I just have peace and clarity. I'm no longer agitated. I just can suddenly think clearly again, and then the world just opens up, and I'm like, okay, now that decision comes.
Have you discovered any supplements that do the same thing?
I have not. I don't actually use a lot of supplements. I kind of take some vitamins in the day, but I'm open.
Just going through my physiological role.
I'm open to do that. I have found music is a big influence for me.
Yeah.
So I put on my headphones, and sometimes it can happen really quickly.
What do you listen to?
Again, very eclectic. So I will mountain bike now. I mountain bike almost every day and lift almost every day as well. Those are the things that I really seem to enjoy. I do a lot of stretching. I do a lot of rucking. I do a lot of outdoor stuff, but those are my two main sports, cross training, lifting, and then mountain biking. I can honestly say this summer in particular, I have gone for some of the most amazing mountain bikes on purely instrumental music that's very flowy and deeply emotional, and I'm almost tearing up as I'm riding. This summer, of course, I thought a lot about my dad, and then I was on a bend for a while. I was mountain biking to Metallica every single day, and both of those things felt completely like the right soundtrack for the thing that I was doing in that moment. So I have a very eclectic taste in music, because I
suspect it's the same as mine. It sounds like it's the same as mine.
Yeah, so I like all the variety. There was one thing, and I know we were 17 rungs down the ladder, but I did want to come to it because I think it's actually a really important thing on this whole fatherhood thing that we talked about. So we had talked about this idea of we spend our energy trying to get the approval of strangers to the detriment of connecting with the people that matter most. And obviously we see this most often and most obviously in social media today, where people are literally ignoring their families in order to get kudos and likes from strangers or comment on something else. But there's some version of, I want social acceptance from this tribe over here, almost always to the detriment of the people who will be at your funeral and who matter to you the most. And by the way, they do matter to you the most and you matter to them the most. No one's denying that. It's just, it's not manifested in how we spend our time. Right? So if there was a third party, I always say to clients, if there was an alien who watched how you lived, what would they say is important to you? So don't tell me what's important to you.
Totally.
Never tell me your values.
Your calendar.
Right. So don't tell me your values. Tell me what you did today. Tell me what you did this week, and then I'll figure out your values, right? So, but it's not just with social media. So, this was something that happened to me, and this was a really big moment for me early on in fatherhood that really impacted me. I was driving home one day from a long work day. We had, literally, 4 babies, essentially, 4 kids who were 4 or under. My wife was at home with them. Obviously, she had a long day, because every day is a long day when your kids are that young. And as I'm driving home, I'm a few minutes from the home, and I'm on the phone with her, and she says, "Oh, by the way, so-and-so called me," and it was someone from our community that we really liked. And she said, "Oh yeah, she wanted your phone number." I said, "Why?" She's like, "Oh, they're trying to re-gravel the parking lot, and she wanted your help, because one of the businesses that I'm involved in is, involved in stone and gravel." And I said, "Okay, thanks." I got off the phone, and I really liked this person. They've since passed away, but they were a phenomenal leader in the community, and they were doing really good work in the community. And what popped into my head is, I'm going to 100%, gravel this parking lot for her. And I was like, I'm going to go surprise her. I'm going to go to the parking lot right now. I'm going to go measure out the parking lot of this community area. And then I'm going to go make a bunch of phone calls, and I'm going to find a way to get this gravel. I'm going to get it delivered. I'm going to just knock it out of the park on this. So I start to turn my truck around to drive back. And then guess what dawned on me? It's like, holy shit, Paul, you have a wife and 4 kids at home who really need you.
Right.
And yeah, you're going to do something good for somebody else. I wasn't going to a strip club or a bar or a casino. I was going to do something good for somebody else. And I genuinely wanted to do that. But I instantly was like, why are you so driven to go help somebody else when the woman that you chose to marry and the woman who has your 4 kids, who's dedicating her entire soul, she's dedicated her body and her soul to your family, needs you? Why are you ready to abandon her in this moment and go help somebody else? And I think that question was a really powerful question.
Huge.
And then I kept going, because this is the whole point of self-mastery and living a cross-examined life, is you have to keep going and ask yourself these questions. Then I thought, and you have to be really honest and don't be afraid of the answer. Regardless of what it reveals about you, don't be afraid. And I thought, I know exactly what it is. My wife is expecting and needing a 9 out of 10 for me today. She's spent the entire day thinking, when's Paul going to be home? When's Paul going to be home? Like, this is really tough. I can't be alone with these 4 kids. Like this is his job. Like, these are our kids. He should be here with me. If I go home and I deliver an 8, which might have been my capacity that day, I won't get a win.
No,
I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home and deliver an 8, which might be my best, but she's expecting a 9. That's not going to be a good feeling. This woman over here wasn't expecting anything. She was just thinking I'd give her a phone call in the name of somebody. She was expecting a 2. And I'm going to go deliver a 5 to her or a 6 to her. I'm going to get her, a brand new parking lot. I will be a fucking hero over here. I'll be a king over here. And then it dawned on me, oh my goodness, I'm ready to abandon my family in this moment because I want the easy, cheap win.
Super powerful.
Isn't that wild?
Very true.
And I was like, oh my gosh, is that really true, Paul? And I was like, I don't know, but it's and I was like, holy shit. So that was a huge realization.
There's a lot within that, isn't there? Because now there's your wife's expectation that she constantly places on you. Not saying yours does this, but someone sitting at home could be like, hey, my wife's impossible to please.
Right.
Therefore, every day I come home, I'm a loser. And
right. I'm doing my absolute best, and my best is never good enough. That's one of the most, that can be a t-shirt for all husbands. Every day I'm doing my best, and my best isn't good enough. We can market that t-shirt today, and every husband in the world would buy it. And by the way, there's a lot of truth to it. But it doesn't mean that you now have been given license to abandon your family. And I wasn't even abandoning my family for something bad. I mean, there's a bunch of negative versions of that phenomenon, right? Which is I don't get the attention from my wife and I get the attention from so-and-so, all that. What was so fascinating to me about that is on the outside, it looked like what I was about to do was very good. Yeah. And here's the crazy thing. Do you know who would have given me all the reward in the world? The world. Think about it. I wasn't just going to get applause from the person I helped. Someone else would have been like, oh, who did this parking lot? Paul Attia did this for you? Oh my gosh, what a great guy. The guy with 4 kids who's like super busy and, trains all the time and does all that stuff. He also does, wow, he's a charitable guy. It's like, again, what did I say? The ants go to where the sugar is. Mm-hmm. We train to where the points go. It's wild. So what you have to do is you have to really be deliberate on what your point system in life is. Because if you go by the world's point system, it'll probably steer you on the wrong path.
Paul Attia's point system. You're going to have to start creating a checklist. That's a brilliant, brilliant perspective. And I don't know that anyone that I know of yet has sort of navigated that level of depth of what's driving their behaviors. Well done, man. Well done. I think I'm certainly sitting here going, how would my life be different had I known this information, thought about this, and actually operationalize it in the moment of all those different times when you're experiencing a hard time, you're experiencing it's so easy to go and like have this instant gratification over here, this instant win. That's like, you're going to get so many accolades and everyone's going to love you. But the one that really matters is over here. And you're choosing that consciously or otherwise to go over here.
Totally. And I would go one step further, which is it's not Paul Attia's point system. It's Ben Pakulski's point system. It's Dave's point system.
Right. But
you have to do the deep work. And that's what self-mastery is, and that's what that reflection is spending time on like, what is my actual point system? And you have to do it on a time horizon that is longer than the moment that you're in. So you actually have to do a time horizon of like your whole life and say, what is my point system? And then start to work on like the self-mastery as to how do I actually navigate that in myself. But it starts with, again, this idea of like cross-examining yourself and asking yourself these really tough questions and being unafraid of the answer.
So you've recently made the decision to step into social media and create an external presence for the first time in your life, or a social presence for the first time in your life. What drove that decision, and what is the objective of your new social media presence.
Yeah. So we haven't, I mean, as of the date of this recording, I've just building up a bank of videos of, I guess, what you guys would call content. Look at all these terms that I'm using. I'm so sophisticated. All right. We haven't officially launched anything and put it into orbit yet. What drove it was probably several different factors, but one is I've now spent 10 years working with many of the world's wealthiest families. I've done all of it kind of privately and not secretly in terms of clandestine, but just off the radar. And I really feel like, we've been able to develop a lot of principles and frameworks that can really help a lot of families. And we have a wait list for the clients that I work with. Like I look at my life and I'm like, oh, there's many other families out there that I think could benefit from some of these principles and frameworks and these dynamics that I've seen in this particular area that I'll not be able to reach. And so, the Google is a great platform to reach people.
Google's going to be obsolete. It's going to be ChatGPT.
Something else, but there's a creating video content and sharing all these principles and frameworks, going and doing podcasts like this and others. I think is going to be a great opportunity to hopefully help and reach other families. So that's the first goal, because I know, from my own experience, which we can talk about some other time. I was in a family business working with my dad, really struggling. And I know it was listening to a guy who's an author, who's a speaker. I went and heard him, and that, had a huge and positive impact on me and my family. So I'm glad that he took the time to write the book. I'm glad that he took the time to go and speak, because I just happened to be an audience member one day. I mean, and then I ended up stalking him and becoming friends with him, of course. But initially I was just an audience member who benefited a lot from his years of experience and observation. So I want to, first and foremost, give that to others. I think that's the driving force. I think just in terms of my own internal level of comfort, now that I've done this for 10 years, I feel, to your point, there's some level of, I've passed my own test. I now feel like, okay, I've thought a lot about this. I don't have all the answers, but I'm certainly unafraid to pursue answers and to try to get it. And I think I've thought my way through things enough. And there's been enough information coming back, landing on the heat map that said, oh yeah, you're onto something here. You're on. Like, I've seen it now work. I've seen a lot of the principles and the frameworks I use in my clients work over and over again. So, when you have some ideas that are impacting people positively, they're probably worth sharing.
It's a big stakes game, isn't it? Like when people have huge amounts of money on the line, huge amounts of family on the line, like the depth of connection on the line, that's a big stakes game. So, and I don't know that, I'm sure there's other people doing it, but I don't know anyone else that I've heard of in that space who's like navigating it and doing it from, checking all three boxes, right? It's like the theoretical knowledge, the practical experience, which is wisdom, and actually caring, which you obviously do. Yeah. And I think you're going to help a lot of people, because I suspect there's a lot of people like going through it and being like, I have no idea who to turn to. I have no idea what to do. This is really big stakes.
It totally is. And what's so fascinating about that part of society, i.e. extremely wealthy people, is, and I say this all the time, I almost give people permission to feel this way, is they believe they're not allowed to have problems. And you understand why, because we live in a world that says if you're wealthy, then your life is perfect. So you don't have problems. Yeah. And so all of a sudden you're now unhappy and you're wealthy. Now it's a double whammy where you think, shit, I'm not allowed to be unhappy. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is it sounds cliche, or it doesn't sound cliche, it sounds paradoxical. You're very alone. So it's very lonely. And the way I always explain it, and I learned this myself by running a family business. If you're in a family business or you're in family wealth, you're not really allowed to talk about it, and there's no one to talk to about it, because you can't talk to your family about your family, obviously.
Right.
That's going to, or at least so we believe, right? It gets pretty complicated. And then you can't go to an external source and say, man, I have a lot of anxiety over A, B, and C, or man, I'm really worried about this. People look at you and they're like, what are you're running this business?
Especially if you have a public persona.
Right. And so it's a very isolating world. But the reality is, everybody, I don't take this approach that there's good problems and there's bad problems. I say whatever is relevant to you is a problem. And if it's something that's actually keeping you up at night, it's probably worth exploring, and we should look into this. And for me, when I think about the work that I'm doing, I'm working with families as they navigate the most important thing to them in their life, which is their family. And so I often say to my clients, one of my big frameworks is, the biggest tax you're ever going to pay in your life is the tax of a broken family, right? So what's the biggest tax a billionaire will ever pay? It is 100% the tax of a broken family. And so you don't want to be the person who spent all this time working to create all this wealth, only to, as I say, get to the end of your life to realize what does it profit a person to gain the whole world but to lose your own family. Mm-hmm. So I actually really love what I do, because at the end of the day, the wealth is just like the arena that we sit in, what we're actually really dealing with is family dynamics, which to me are like one of the most important things in the universe. The wealth part of it is just that wealth is this wicked force multiplier that takes it and puts it into this like really, really complex, tangible situation. And then I like to come in and help deal with the intangibles.
It amplifies emotions, doesn't it? Like everyone will tell you, somebody just died. Somebody's mad about somebody's money and taking this money. And you're like, I hear that story so much.
Yes. And it goes back to, again, my belief in sort of optimizing life in a lot of ways. I really think that there's a great opportunity for us to optimize as many of these situations around us as possible. And so if you all of a sudden have a family business that's done very well, it's employing a lot of people, you have a wealthy family, there's a lot of good that's being done, as part of that ecosystem. And so if we have an opportunity to come in and really help that family create greater communication, greater stability, greater awareness, that's actually going to be a net benefit, not for that family, but for everybody else around them. And that to me is really, really compelling. And so I love this work. I practiced law for a lot of years. I was a private lawyer and a criminal prosecutor. And then I went into my own family's business working with my dad. And that is when I had courtside seats to family dynamics and family business. And that was when I realized that good intentions aren't enough. Because I had very good intentions when I started working with my father. He had very good intentions, but we hadn't developed a system of productive, I call it productive and honest communication. We had not done that. Because our old dynamic was the dynamic we had from when, I was the idiot 16-year-old and he was the immigrant dad and that's the case for most families. You haven't updated your code to be able to communicate well as adults. So when do families pick up their communication pattern? It's in the least optimal situation possible.
Yeah.
Right? And what happens is families just don't update their code. So you don't know how to communicate as adults properly because you developed your communication styles and trends when you were kids. That's obviously a broad oversimplification,
that makes sense.
But then layer, wealth upon that, and then layer identity upon that, and then layer in-laws upon that. And as I often say, it's a miracle any family business survives.
Emotions.
Yes. And layer on and add, it's a miracle any single family with significant wealth can actually navigate it well. It is such a force multiplier of an already dynamic situation, which is just family life in general.
The world needs what you do, man. I'm glad we got to sit down. I'm grateful to have you as a friend. You're a legend of a man.
I really appreciate the time, man. Always. Thank you.